if you actually are, if you understand the philosophy that they're using, it's also very scary. The critical theory is like an area of philosophy which was really prominent in something called the Frankfurt School, which is just a fancy way of saying a collection of thinkers who all focused on the same sort of ideas. And they basically were warning against the very thing that Palantir is now trying to do. So I just want to take a lot of these ideas and show you, for instance, Karp's PhD thesis is on language and aggression and how you can use it to coalesce a society and get the outcome you want. Now, when someone wrote their thesis on that, you need to be particularly conscious of Tiggs, thank you so much. I'm a partner now. Did you know that? And I got my nails done because I'm a partner. Thank you. What was I saying? Yeah, I know. The purple tick came through the other day. It doesn't give me anything but a purple tick, but I'm the kind of girl that a purple tick means a lot to. That's all I needed. But yeah, anyway, I think the Palantir video will be good because I think it's a natural run-up to the Dark Gothic MAGA video. No, Palantir is trying to take over the government. Yeah. Go ahead. The fun thing is, Peter Thiel is gay. Alex Karp is black. They're both neurodivergent. So really, we should all be supporting Palantir. You guys are not allies. Did you ever think about that? I bet you didn't. I bet you thought you were so good. And the Ayatollah is a gay Muslim amputee. I was thinking on the Stairmaster today, because that's right, I went to the gym. On the Stairmaster today, I was reflecting on what mental illness they all have, right? Because you can't say like, oh, these guys are super stupid. They're not stupid. They are truly very intelligent. Are they very lucky as well? Absolutely. I don't think they're intelligent necessarily because of the products they've made. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think that they're intelligent in that way, but they're definitely intelligent. But then I came back to what Mark Andreessen said about like having zero introspection. And I'm like, wow, if you don't introspect, right? If you don't think about anything, really, you don't reflect on things, you're never reflecting on whether you did the right or wrong thing. You're never reflecting on any of your own moral qualities, right? Thanks, Harvey. It was hard. I almost didn't go. I got my 10,000 steps in and I thought, you know what? That's enough, girl. Rest. And then I said, no. You said you'd go to the gym 3 times this week. And it's Wednesday and you haven't gone once. I will watch it, I think. I think, yeah. They get high signal, not much noise. That's a really good point. But I do think, look, I just think I would be lying if I said I didn't think that Peter Thiel and Alex Karp have intelligence. You know, I did 8 kilometers 2 days ago. Did you run it or walk it? Oh yeah, the other thing I'm so ADHD brain today. I don't have it. I know it's hard to believe. Walking is great. Walking is better than running. Your knees don't deserve that punishment. The other thing I was going to say about the video is I need you guys to know that once I make a video, I have to. It's been a very long time. Oh my god, I hate myself. I hate looking at myself. I have to exit all of that information from my brain. It has to go. Yeah, the thing is, guys, I also, when I say I think they're really smart, I think there are lots of really smart people in the world. It's not like some unique quality. Like, there are a huge amount of highly intelligent people in the world. So it's like, one thing I'm going to stop is like, I don't like people being like, oh, they're dumb, as a way to like try and discredit people. because it's just not a statement of fact. And I think it would also make you underestimate the threat, right? We need to acknowledge that these men are very smart, which means that they're capable of evil things, right? They're smart and they don't introspect, and that should be worrying to all of us. Wallach!
Thanks for finding the edited version. I refuse to log into it though, sorry.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah, exactly, Zula. Smart. Can do nuclear physics, can't talk to a girl. Thank you so much, Wallach. The video we will watch for you. But aren't entirely smart, or my things not a binary thing. There's lots of, that's exactly what I'm trying to say. Like, there are lots of really smart people. It doesn't mean that it's not, I think sometimes it's like people say it as if it's saying more than it's saying, right? I'm not saying, there's kind of like a, what do you say, in logic, where it's like there's a necessary, people are thinking that when I say, oh, they're super smart, that I'm agreeing with their conclusion that they should run the world. No, I don't agree with that. If you saw how I ran my personal life, you would wonder how I made it out of elementary school. Okay. I also think, Harvey, I think they're intelligent. Like, I do think they're intelligent. I just don't think intelligence is rare, and I don't think that intelligence grants you anything special. I don't think you're owed anything because you're intelligent. Congratulations, you can think. So can, most people. Apodictic certainty, if you say so. We'll go with that, Evan. Thank you, Mom. The nail lady was like, do you like them? And I was like, I need to leave because I need to start making people look at them. An inability, yeah, definitely low EQ. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm like, we should be fearful of people who are like, hey, I'm super smart and I know how to do all of these things, but I refuse to think about myself and my actions. That's something I don't want to be smart about. I'm intentionally choosing not to be smart about it. Teal could never have nails like this. You guys before with the dark blue nails, you were like, they're nice. They make you feel kind of intimidated by my indie prowess. But these suckers? I think the Doge kids are stupid. I'm talking specifically in this case. I'm not even really extending to Mark Andreessen, who I don't think is all that smart. I am talking specifically about Alex Karp and Peter Thiel. I also need you to know, these were sharper. And I said, can you please soften the tips a little bit? Because I don't have the personality to carry those nails as sharp as they currently are. Can you just round off the tops a little?
Well, I mean, I'm not bald
Thanks,
anymore,
guys.
so I can.
But this is what I mean, and Jade, I'm trying to avoid any correlation outside of just like, being intelligent doesn't make you morally good. Being intelligent doesn't owe you the right to be at a higher position in society. Being intelligent doesn't mean that you make good decisions. Being intelligent literally just means you have the certain ability to do pattern recognition, make logical conclusions, like hold lots of information in your head. It just literally means very boring intelligence. I don't think you can see the design with my camera the way it is. This is a French tip with a zebra pattern on the tip. This is blue lizard scales, or kind of a crocodile pattern. This is a full chrome nail with some bumps on it. And then this is a plain nail with a chrome spiral on it. And then my thumbnail is a yellow flower. Yeah, that's true, Tiggs. Listen. I am Sky. I've mentioned this before. As a linguistic philosopher who likes to focus very specifically on my type of linguistics, on my type of language philosophy, I'm not interested in structuralism or post-structuralism. So semiotics gets a little scary for me. Wittgenstein only, though, like not the structuralist, post-structuralist. Being intelligent, you can choose how to use that intelligence. Unfortunately, it does mean that you can use it to create a tool to kill everybody. And that's why, like, I don't know how many times I can insist upon this. I insist. Okay. The reason I insist that these men are intelligent is not to give them a compliment. It's to say, don't let them play dumb, don't let them play naive, don't take your eyes off them, because you have an evil dummy in power at the moment. You don't want to see what a smart dummy can do, especially when the smart dummy is funded and surrounded. I mean, the evil dummy is funded and surrounded by smart evil smarties. I'm not saying I really, like, I need you guys to stop hearing it as a compliment. I know that we're told, like, oh, you're so intelligent as a compliment. I don't mean it as a compliment. I just mean it as a descriptor. Okay? The men's aren't dumb. The men aren't dumb. Now, some things I want to tell you. I'm very excited to show you this video that I remember nothing of and I look ugly in. It's fine. And I don't want you guys, I'll kill you if I put the video up and you're like, you look exactly the same. I know I do to you, because I do externally look exactly the same. But to me, I don't know her. Okay? I don't know her, and we're just not focusing on it. Okay. But the reason I think it's worth watching as well is it kind of shows how much the personal factor can totally fuck up negotiations. Like, and how much, like, planning and stuff is supposed to go into it, and when you don't do it, and there's a single person who is kind of fucking shit up, how bad it can be. Oh, sick. You stressed me out because you said Gerard, but that's a different Gerard. Yay, good, because I'm just doing this on Twitch. Makes me think of the flack Mehdi Hassan got for saying Tucker did something good, as in journalistically, not morally. It's so difficult. Yeah, it's just like one of those things where it's like, I'm saying it not like for a very specific, like, I didn't put my lights on. Hang on, this won't do. Just wait 1 second. Just wait 1 second. Guys? That's so much better. I know you were worried. Now we're more like, how we ought be. Oh, I'm not looking. Look, I'm going to overshare with you because I'm a partner now, and that's what we do now. And I've obviously never overshared with you guys before. I have really bad endometriosis, and I really should get the surgery, but I don't want to. Mainly because I don't want to be in bed for like a week, and I don't want to. But now, for the last like 2 weeks, it's been like bad. I know. Why is there always something wrong with this bitch? I know. Tell me. Like I know. Um, and I have it very bad to the point that my inside bits are kind of fused together, so everything kind of moves around, together. So when I eat a big meal, everything's moving. I'm in a lot of pain. I'm not feeling great today, but I'm just like, well, you haven't felt great for 3 weeks, so you kind of just have to like suck it up. But I really should get the surgery. I think it's super common. Ning nang nongs. I feel like maybe it's getting more common, or maybe people are just getting like diagnosed more. I don't know, but I remember getting the ultrasound and then getting the results, and she was like, yeah, so you have like, grade 4 endo throughout your abdomen, and your fallopian tubes are fused to your bowel on the right side, which is why you're having that pain on the right side. And I was like, cool. And she's like, so you just schedule surgery whenever? And I was like, surgery? And that was 3 years ago. So my insides at this stage are probably just one solid unit, I assume. I assume everything is joined now. Why are my earphones like this? Okay, so one of my exes had it. It definitely seems to affect the girlies somewhat commonly. Yeah, the thing is, as well, as it can be hard. Like even people who have the ultrasound and it doesn't show up. Sometimes people get the laparoscopic surgery and then it shows up. It doesn't show up on the ultrasound because it just looks like tissue. Wait, hang on. There's something funny here. Anyway. I think I'm a smart fella fart smeller. I find you funny, but I just sense you've got something up your sleeve that I'm not going to find funny. So I'm going to preemptively ban you because I'm a partner now, and I just can. It's nothing personal. I find you funny. I think personally you and we would get along, but I know it's coming. Okay. I want to give you a chance, but I'm a smart fella fart smeller that really, it's the name that's throwing me off. So it's nothing personal. Godspeed. What was I thinking? Will I be able to deadlift? I can't deadlift now. There was a woman in the gym today and she was she was doing a deadlift, I assume, with the actual bar. And I was watching her from behind. And I was so impressed. And then I was like, oh my God, you are the creep at the gym. You're literally just like staring at this chick while she's doing deadlifts. You are the creep. But I wanted to go over and be like, hey, I need you to tell me how to do that. The problem is, okay, I got a couple of problems. 1, I'm really tall. 2, my tallness is mostly leg. Just putting that out there. I'm like 175 centimeters tall. 110 of that is leg. So I'm not proportioned. Next, I have really bad anterior pelvic tilt. Like so bad, I don't think any of my abs are on ever. And I don't think any of my back is on ever. I have really extremely tight hips. I cannot do a squat. My hips are tight. Okay, I can't get to a right angle. So I'm already working with a lot of things that I know are predisposing me to do it wrong. And then just trying to do it, I don't know. Having long legs is good for a deadlift. Okay, well, then don't tell anyone that. I got a huge posture problem. I also have really bad grip, so I need to get those hand things. My ulterior motive is to disclose what linguistics I can from your brain because I assume it's easier to consume than reading it myself. What are you... For me, reading the Girard stuff? Formica, how's about this? I don't say numbers on stream because I have a big space in my heart for people who may be distressed with issues related to food and body. But I am looking to body recomp, and I've got about probably 10 pounds to work with. But I mean, even if I stayed at my weight that I'm at now, but it just all became muscle, I would love that. I have no muscle. You can tell me what to do at the gym. I'll do it. 3 days max though. I'm not going more than that. You come, and I don't want to be doing more than like 4 or 5 exercises, but I also think my feet are very flat. I saved all these things about fixing my feet. Listen, we just got to watch the video. We're not here to talk about my postural problems, okay? And alignment. No, I want to do heavy weight, low reps because I want a progressive overload and I want to get muscly. Yeah. Okay, we're going to watch the video. We are gonna watch my little video. You're gonna be so shocked. You're gonna be like, oh my god. Why does she look like that? I'm gonna say I know. I know. Let's just I just lost chat. Oh, I found it. Haha. Now, let's see if I can get this video to the... Oh my god, look at my skeezy ass face. Oh my god, what a bad little pause screen. It's what I've got. The pause screen is what it is. Okay? No, I have bad grip because I have rheumatoid arthritis, so that's not getting better, unfortunately. The synovial joints in my hands, the inflammation is eating away at the bones like little worms. It's disgusting. But yeah, we're gonna have to strap in. Okay. Oh my god. I know, Lord Ennui. I'm a sickly person. And because of my moon face, it doesn't give it away. And I obviously have a joie de vivre, I have a love for life about me that makes you think, but I actually am like a sickly, like, in the time I was meant to be born, I would have already been sent to the country. You know? They would be like, she needs a temperate climate, a relaxing situation. They would have given me a horse to brush. I would read for a couple of hours and then I'd say, I have to go rest. And everyone would be like, yes, do. I wasn't made for this time. I was made to be put out to pasture. I was made to go to the doctor with my husband, and then the doctor would say, you'll have to move. She simply won't survive in the cold. That's fine. I was born in this life. I reflect all the time on this with Pixel. I'm like, I was made for a different time. Okay, oh my god. I'm aware that I look like fucking Jigsaw in this free screen for some reason. We're not going to discuss it. I'd show you my legs, but as we've discussed, I'm not all that flexible. I don't want to stand up and I don't want to show feet. I can't work out the way around that. I meet so much of the criteria for a lobotomy. I would have been lobotomized and I would have been institutionalized. Like, when I look at the criteria, when did a woman get institutionalized? When did she get a lobotomy? Yeah. I am the perfect person for that. I meet all of the criterion. criteria. No, there's more than one. Wait, let me just find it. Criteria for a lobotomy. (1930s). I think I would have got. I don't think the 1930s. I am really more of like 1800s type girl. I think the 1930s are a bit too late for me. Here we go.
Mental health disorders. It says this new brain technique is said to have aided 65% of mentally ill persons. It is the surgery for the soul that was applied to 20 mentally ill patients, and 15% claimed it improved. 15%. That's nothing. Okay, let's put a finger down if you would qualify based on their criteria for a lobotomy. Apprehension. Of course, everyone's apprehensive. Tension. Apparently you can't be tense at all. Anxiety. Yep. Depression. Yep, have had that. Insomnia. Suicidal ideation.
Sorry, guys. Hate to be dark.
Delusions. Hallucinations.
I've not hallucinated.
Crying spells.
I do
pretty
have
much
crying spells.
that just makes you a student. Melancholia.
Definitely
Obsessions.
have that. Definitely
Yes.
have that.
Panic states.
Yes.
Yep. Disorientation.
No.
Psychalgesia.
Don't know.
Nervous indigestion.
Yes.
And hysterical paralysis.
Yes.
So basically all of us would pretty much qualify.
No, stop acting. No, not all of us would qualify. You're embarrassing us women. You know it's only some of us. Here, let me just check if her one's better. Where's the sound, Bubba?
According to the New York Times article from 1937, people with the following symptoms would benefit from a lobotomy: tension,
Oh, it's the same one.
apprehension,
Yeah. no.
anxiety, depression.
I got it all, guys. I would have loved a lobotomy. Unfortunately, I don't think they do them anymore. And also, it's too late for me. We're deep enough now. We got to keep going. Okay, ready for a jump scare? Oh, it's me. With this creepy ass fucking MAGA face for some reason in this freeze frame. I don't think men got lobotomies. I don't think that was for them. Maybe the gay men. Thank you, Broadside. Thank you. Thank you. My torso, I'm skinnier now. Who is she? Okay, you ready? You can still get ECT. That's just totally normal, though. Okay, guys, so this is about Oslo. I haven't watched it. I'm gonna actually... Evan, shut up. Shut up. Shut up. I know you were just saying that to annoy me. I know I literally said don't say that, and that's why you're saying it. And it's working. So congratulations. Congratulations. Watching old unreleased video on Oslo talks. Okay. You guys just gotta wait for me to do this, okay? Because there's gonna be people coming in being like, what are we watching? Shh. Don't do that. I'm a partner now. I don't respond to questions like that. You'll have to talk to just talk directly to Twitch. I don't... There. Okay. Let's watch Are you ready? Oslo talks were when Ehud Barak came in as prime minister and they tried to continue the Oslo agreement and get some traction on it because obviously Netanyahu was actively against it. So if you've watched my Netanyahu series, where we were up to at the end of the last part, Netanyahu literally doing everything in his power in his first term to tank the Oslo peace agreement. Now we're going to Ehud Barak and the ideas that he's going to fix it. Oh my God. Here we go. I don't know what, I might say everything wrong. I don't know. Okay. I know it's been a very long time since you last saw me, since I last made a video. I can't make me any louder. Is there a way to make myself louder than having everything on loud? I guess I could go back into... It's been a very, very long time, yeah. Is there any way to make myself even louder? No. But I'm so quiet. But to be fair, the last video I made was on Netanyahu's first term, and he disappeared for a long time before coming back for his second term. So I feel like I'm at least on brand. Before coming out with the third part of my Netanyahu documentary, I wanted to do some videos covering developments between Israel and Palestine in the period where he's not in office. I actually wanted to start with the run-up to Camp David, because I think a lot of the time people look at Camp David in isolation and without the context of what happens before. Oh my God, now I remember. Wallach. This video isn't on the talks. This video is on the run up to the talks because there's so much that happens that... Hi, Joe, man. We're the problem. It's us. All of us. If we're not actively burning down the patriarchy, we're complicit. We cause so much harm, and I'm sorry for this. Thank you. Kevin, I accept your apology. I accept it. And I appreciate it. Why is your thing not coming up, though? For some reason, it says it's hiding your comment. But, okay. Evan? Stop. I'm having an ugly day, so of course I look the same. Stop it. Missing why it failed. Everyone knew that Camp David was not going to be successful before they landed in America. This video is kind of frustrating, but the next video, which will be on the actual summit of Camp David, is a lot of fun. I hope you enjoy the video. References in the description below. Let's get started. When we left off, it was the end of Netanyahu's first term as Prime Minister, and the peace process was in absolute tatters. Netanyahu had always strongly been against the Oslo peace process. He went out of his way to undermine the accords while he was in office. When we get to this election and Ehud Barak is running against Netanyahu, there was significant hope that he would be able to get the peace process back on track. Clinton really threw his weight behind Ehud Barak's campaign. So the Arab parties within Israel also supported Barak's candidacy. Even Yasser Arafat was doing things behind the scenes to try and help Barak secure the prime ministership. All of that said, like Netanyahu, Barak was never really a big fan of the Oslo process. When he was Yitzhak Rabin's second in charge and Minister of the Interior, he abstained from voting on the Oslo Accords. But in the lead up to, I think that's something as well that like, the Oslo Peace Accords were an agreement, they were a framework agreement. And that's something important to think about in terms of Iran as well. A lot of the time, what we're hoping for isn't an actual agreement. That can take forever to get. What we're looking to get is a framework for the discussions. Like you should always think about these kind of like peace negotiations as a scheduling agreement. Who's going to take the next step? What little thing are you going to do? And then we'll do a little thing, and then you'll do a little thing, and then we'll do a little thing. It's not just like, okay, yeah, a concept of an agreement. Exactly. It's not just like, bam, and we have an agreement. So like, even in terms of what's happening with Iran, they're so disparate where they're at in terms of their aims and their goals and their desires. The best we can hope for is some sort of extremely broad framework. They should be focusing on one or two things that they agree on, right? And light ideas where it's like, Iran agrees to stop processing uranium for a period of blah. And then the details will be discussed. Iran agrees to put a limit on missiles. But the actual number is to be discussed. How it will be enforced is to be discussed. America agrees to lift sanctions and pay reparations. But the details will follow. That's what you're hoping for. So the Oslo Accords are a framework. They're not a peace agreement between Israel and Palestine. They were a framework of things that needed to be achieved to build trust in order to get to a point where at the end of the Accords allotted period, they would actually be able to discuss what a peace would look like. So it was not a peace agreement. It was a framework for discussions and a scheduling document for saying, like, this is what we're going to do to get to the point where we can have a discussion about peace. But the other thing that is important is, well, Harvey, it looks like America is going to pay the UAE a bunch of fucking money, which is insane, but they don't have a choice because the UAE filled up what's-his-face's Trump's pocket so much. I don't know, I don't know. It's going to be stressful. It's going to be stressful. Can they afford to pay reparations? Probably not, but that's what this is how this sort of thing happens, right? Where it's like, maybe they'll say you can do a toll for this long on boats moving through the strait, and that counts as reparations. Maybe they'll get the Gulf states to pay. Maybe they'll come up with some agreement about supplying something like power in lieu of the nuclear. Like, it won't be like straight, like US taxpayer dollars are being transferred into your fund right now. Maybe it'll be the release of the money that was paid to the US for weapons that they never returned with the interest, and they'll say, well, technically we want the interest to count as reparations payments. So that's what I mean when it's like you have a high level agreement, reparations will be paid, and then you'll have the specifics worked out in the actual discussions which follow. Oh my God, who can remember? Aside from reparations, can we stop current enablers and hold them accountable? Which enablers do you mean? Which enablers do you mean? Enablers are everywhere. This election. Oh, wait, and the other thing I wanted to say is something that, so the Oslo Accords, which were obviously signed under Yitzhak Rabin was not necessarily a super pro-Palestinian guy. He had a very bad reputation during the First Intifada, and he didn't necessarily support any sort of peace agreement with Palestine. That wasn't his position, but he knew that something had to change. And so he did this Oslo Accords as a way to kind of like buy time. Hang on, I fucked my shit up. There we go. I fixed it. Don't worry. But yeah, even the most pro-peace members of the Israeli government during this period of time were not actually all that pro-peace, right? It's kind of the same thing we have at the moment where it's like anyone but Netanyahu, and it's like, yeah, but Naftali Bennett and Yair Lapid, like, these people aren't necessarily proposing anything different. Yair Lapid said that when Trump tried to make peace with Iran, he was like, this is the worst day since October 7. Like, the good guys are not necessarily that good. We're not talking about, like, champions of peace. We're not talking about pro-Palestine warriors. So the point is to say, yes, anyone than Netanyahu is better, but that doesn't make them pro-Palestinian, and that's like very important to. And so what they're saying here about what I'm saying here about Yitzhak Rabin and Ehud Barak is Yitzhak Rabin hesitantly pushed for the Oslo Accords. He wasn't super into it, even though that's how he was remembered. But even when he was, and Ehud Barak was his second, as his second, he abstained and didn't vote in favor of the Oslo Accords. He does present himself as the candidate who is ready to go full force ahead with the peace process, and he's, for all intents and purposes, the pro-peace candidate. On the 6th of July, 1999, he successfully defeats Netanyahu and is declared to be the new Prime Minister of Israel. He decides that he wants to make a wall-to-wall coalition. Coalition governments are already the norm in Israel, but Barak thought that his best shot at progress when it came to the Palestinians and other Arab states was to incorporate as many parties as possible. So in this case, there were 7 parties that were incorporated into government. This is such a problem in Israel. The coalitions, they limit what you can do so much because every 2 seconds it's like, well, I'll lose government if I do that because one person will be upset. Yeah, exactly, Matthew. Only actually left out 2 parties. So that was the Likud, Netanyahu's party, and the Arab List. So the Arab List is the Arab parties. And they were a little bit shocked because they had really done a lot of work to support Barak. Barak was concerned that if he included the Arabs in his coalition while also pushing for a peace process, it could be used to undermine that progress by saying, oh, the Arabs are pushing this. I think Barak thought that in having a broad coalition, that would... It's kind of the same way that, remember how I talked about how Israel didn't get involved in the Gulf War because America was like, if you get involved, everyone else will drop out because it'll be seen as like an Israel thing, right? So in this case, Ehud Barak is like, I know you supported me, I know you pushed for me, but if I include you in the coalition, everyone will say this is like an Arab list driven thing. So I have to fuck you over. Automatically turn into broad support for his decisions. But as you'll see when we go through this ultimately backfired and resulted in a perpetually precarious majority in government to which Barak was ultimately beholden. Like many Israeli prime ministers before him, Ehud Barak's professional history was as a general. And while there are some generals that seamlessly transition into the role of prime minister, Barak was not a natural diplomat. Many who worked with him commented on his significant lack of tact, his lack of charm, his generally harsh demeanor and black and white personality. The night of the election, color grade. It's kind of interesting because Trump is also not a natural diplomat. And there are now active reports coming out about how much his like truth socialing is fucking up the talks. Oh, that's just one thing I quickly want to say, which is obviously I talk about this in my reel, which you can all go and watch on my Instagram, and you can like it. Yes. But something that I think could end up happening with these peace talks is similar to the Cuban Missile Crisis, where all of the talk publicly will stay quite aggressive and quite tough, and then some sort of secret deal will be made and offered behind the scenes. But we're kind of far away from that at the moment because 1, no one's talking, and 2, this requires some level of strategic flexibility from the United States, which I don't know if anyone is allowed to do under Trump. I don't know. This is the problem with like not going with professional diplomats. You have like I would be so fucking pissed if I was the Iran specialist. Yeah, exactly, Night Gee. If I were the Iran specialist, I spoke Farsi, I studied the whole time. I actually think, Wallach, you would get some movement from Iran. I don't think you'll get any movement on the Strait, but I think on nuclear, you would get some movement. I don't think there's going to be movement on the proxies either, but you could get some movement on nuclear, I think. I think there's been, although I am nervous about things that I'm reading in relation to Pezeshkian and Ghalibaf butting heads with the IRGC, because to me, I really want to get, if I'm in charge, we always go back to this little thought experiment. What if Joe were in charge? if I'm in charge, I want something on the table with signatures on it before. This is kind of like, okay, I'm going to piss some people off here. I'm going to say it, and I hope you understand what I mean. I've always been in favor of Israel negotiating with Hamas because Hamas in the later years, this is pre-October 7, Hamas in their later years were starting to basically get the equivalent of being called pussies by Islamic Jihad, PIJ. And so in my mind, it's better the devil you know than the more extreme, right? And so in my mind, I'm like, well, while you've got Pezeshkian, pretty much the only pragmatist left, and Ghalibaf, someone who would love to be able to put a feather in his cap like this kind of deal, you should be pushing for a deal. Because the second they fall out with the IRGC Top Guns, right, then you're fucked. It's going to be replaced by people who will make even less of a deal. I think this is what I said in my reel. I said that Iran is actually in the worst possible position right now because ultimately they wanted a decisive war. The whole point of this conflict for them was, this is existential. We're going to do this to the extent that no one will do this again. So Trump being like, no, you know what? We're just going to have an unlimited ceasefire. In fact, America might just stop fighting. This is why inevitably Iran will escalate again, because the only thing worse for them than the economic pain, which they can pass on to their own people, and like escalating and being hit, which once again mostly affects their own people, the only thing bad for the regime is having this war end with no kind of agreement, no kind of wins in terms of reparations, lifting of sanctions, and acknowledgement of their control over the strait. The only thing worse than that for them is having this end without any recognition of those things, and then they get bombed again in like a year or two because they won't survive that. And they know they won't survive it. So the second an Iranian ship is taken as part of this blockade, they will escalate to say to America, you can't unilaterally stop this war. And it sucks because then Trump will it's just bad. I just wish they would. I unequivocally, though, believe that the strategic flexibility at this stage needs to come from the United States, just in terms of their blockade on the blockade. Guys, why am my throat so sore? I think I'm getting sick. Pixel said she's sick. Maybe she gave it to me through the phone. Kiss me through the phone. After campaigning on the concessions he was willing to make in order to fulfill the Oslo Accord, Barack made a speech known as the Four No's, where he outlined what he believed would be the foundation of any permanent settlement. No to returning to the 1967 borders, no to dismantling settlements, no to compromising over Jerusalem, and no to any right of return by Palestinians to Israel's sovereign jurisdiction. Which is basically the four major contentions of an Israel-Palestine peace. So he's like, hey guys, I'm willing to compromise. And then he wins government and he's like, not at all, loser. Who did you think you were talking to? No, Matthew. Iranians can accept the blockade of the blockade in terms of the economic pain for a period of time. What they can't accept is the economic pain and then the conflict ending with no resolution. Because once they're economically fucked, this is like, yes, their narrow win condition is simple survival. So technically, no, they didn't lose the war if it just ended tomorrow because Trump decided to stop attacking. Sure. But they will be so economically weakened. You have a lot of incitement of the people at the moment because obviously it's a regime worse than ever, right? They will not survive mini wars every 2 years. Yeah, the regime can outlive a failing economy, but what they will not survive. The people, I just think it's obvious to me that the regime says they will not survive if this happened again and again and again. Otherwise, they wouldn't have gone so hard this time. That was the whole thing, that they couldn't do this. They couldn't continue to be attacked every 1 to 2 years. It wasn't, otherwise they wouldn't have fucked up their relationship with all the Gulf states. They wouldn't have gone this hard. They went this hard to get a definitive agreement so that this would stop happening. The regime can outlive a failed economy. It cannot outlive being a failed state. They have to push the failing economy onto the people. The people include Artesh. The people include IRGC soldiers. And there will come a point where that will not be sustainable. And if they keep going to war, it's just to not see the impact that this has had on Iran, economically, in terms of infrastructure, it isn't a win condition for them as a country. Maybe a win condition in terms of the conflict, but in terms of their long-term survival, they will not survive if they have the economic pressure and they keep getting hit like this. But we need to make the same kind of analysis on the other side. Well, yeah, that is what Iran is doing in thinking technically we can outweight the global economy. Technically, but this is the problem with the talks right now, right? You do the analysis from both sides. Both sides think they have the upper hand, right? Both sides. Iran is thinking we can outlast the global economy. We can take the economic pain, and eventually the world will be so fucked up. Trump has midterms. He has all of these things that are kind of weighing on him. He will be forced to move first. But Trump also knows the win card for him isn't the blockade. The win card for him is now just quietly, unilaterally deciding that the war is kind of over. And maybe he decides to light it up again later. Because if Trump is like, yeah, we're done, we're not attacking anymore, like, it's just peace now, we don't know why Iran is doing this with the Strait, eventually the EU will step in, eventually other powers will have to step in. The problem is there are no talks at the moment because both sides think they have the upper hand. So no one is willing to be flexible. And that is going to create a war of attrition, which is not actually, a short war of attrition is what Iran wanted, but a long war of attrition is not good for Iran. So it's not really, something is going to change, right? The delay strategy, which Trump keeps using, something is going to change. So if we look at the 3 things that can happen, escalation, negotiation, or delay, the delay card has been played, which means now delay can keep being played, but someone is going to want to change the environment. Someone is going to want to change, all my shit went off. Someone is going to want to change things because it's not going to be working. So delay is going to work for America. Once America intercepts an Iranian ship, Iran is going to say that was a violation of the ceasefire, and they are going to attack again. That is going to be escalation. We're going to go back into a cycle of escalation. So right now what we're in is a precarious stalemate. The best case scenario is the Cuban Missile Crisis scenario. Everyone gets to keep being like, yo, the fuckest toughest guy in the room. We fucking won this war. We'll never back down. The blockade is only making the IRGC more intransigent, not less. But they won't survive this just going back and this becoming the every year they get hit by Israel in America. Every year they get hit by Israel. Like that's not, yeah. The regime, it will become it's not so much that the regime won't survive, the country won't survive. It will become a failed state. I think a ceasefire is always the right call. Right? A stalemate sucks. But getting people not, God, my face, I cannot look at this jigsaw witch. Any chance the US will leave the Gulf altogether? No. So do you think US allies would just never turn their back on the US? It's not that they won't turn their back on the US. It's that their concern is the strait, right? Their concern is getting oil and food and helium and LNG. So external allies are going to say, hey, we actually want nothing to do with this conflict. We are not picking a side. We want nothing to do with it. We want you to resolve it. But given that it is not resolved, we need to do something about getting oil to the world. Yeah, I think that the strait is, I have said, Lord on Way, I don't know if you heard me. The person who needs to, the side that needs to have strategic flexibility right now is America. America needs to stop their blockade of the blockade, because Iran will not return to the table until that happens. And the blockade of the blockade is the thing that's making everything dangerous. So I'm 100% clear on what needs to happen. Howdy. Yeah, Elysium. Well, I think Iran will hit escalate the second an Iranian ship is blocked by that blockade. Hopefully, someone makes a concession before then, but we'll see. It was the most... Oh yeah, so back, just in case you forgot, because we had a little detour. Oh my god. I can't look at her. The 4 basic, most intractable issues of Israel-Palestine peace. Ehud Barak has won government, and the very night that he won it, campaigning on being a peacemaker, he said, these are the 4 things I will not negotiate on. Straightforward and unequivocal statement on the topics to be negotiated and settled for permanent status. And to be honest, it made it seem like reaching any agreement would be pretty much impossible, as those issues are red lines for the Palestinians as well. Barak's point of view on Palestine was opaque at best. Barak went out of his way to keep any member of, well, not Trump, Evan, because Trump believes that any negotiation makes you a pussy. Did you consider that? Did you consider that diplomacy makes you a fucking pussy, bro? Didn't think so. An hour ago, Iran said it seized 2 ships. Iran seized 2 ships, or the US seized 2 Iranian ships? The original Oslo team out of the process, because he didn't like the original Oslo Accords. He felt that far too many concessions had been given, and he didn't want people with that point of view going into this round of negotiations. The other thing that Barak did that complicated the situation was that he explained to Arafat his intention was to progress on final status negotiations and integrate. Oh, well, I don't know what that means. I don't have a sense of how America will respond to that. We'll just have to wait and see. Okay, guys, I need to go back and listen to myself in full. Issues are red lines for the Palestinians as well. Barak's point of view on Palestine was opaque at best. Barak went out of his way to keep any member of the original Oslo team out of the process, because he didn't like the original Oslo Accords. He felt that far too many concessions had been given, and he didn't want people with that point of view going into this round of negotiations. The other thing that Barak did that complicated the situation was that he explained to Arafat his intention was to progress on final status negotiations and integrate the implementation of things like the Y memorandum into those final status negotiations. Everything else. So remember how I said that a lot of framework agreements are about scheduling? So when it came to Israel-Palestine and peace agreements, there were things like the Y memorandum, there were extra documents that were created under Netanyahu because he refused to stick to the Oslo framework. So then the Palestinians and Arafat had to push to get new memorandums put through so that Israel would be forced to do what they said they would do in the Oslo agreement. So they fell off schedule. New memorandums had to be created to put them back on schedule, right? Say, hey, these are the things that need to happen before we reach our final status negotiations. Let's get all these little things done first. So when we get to final status, to the big issues that we really disagree on, that a lot of this stuff is out of the way. So when it comes to things like the Y memorandum, that's about moving land over, right, into Palestinian areas of control. So the ABC, you know, all the stuff that is about like who has government control, who has policing control, etc., etc. So the Y memorandum was about giving over land to Palestinians. Now Barak is coming in. He's saying to Arafat, I don't want to do the schedule thing. Let's just wait. Let's just do it all at once. Let's just do it in one big go. We'll do final status and we'll do all of that then. But the Oslo Accords are meant to be over 5 years where land is slowly being pushed back to the Palestinians. So this is kind of a crazy thing to request. Fuck the scheduling. Fuck any trust building. Fuck any institutional setup. Anything like that. Like, even though we have completely trashed every agreement we've made with you up to this point, I would like to ask you to trust me and we'll just sort it all out right at the end. Outstanding would just be dealt with in that. The two parties would conduct negotiations on permanent status issues and they should be concluded within 12 to 15 months. That would be it. That would be the end to the conflict. Barak said, look, if we haven't reached an agreement in 6 months, we can go back. We can implement the Y Accords. We can implement the Oslo Accords. But Arafat was kind of insistent that the negotiations of the final status issues take place separately to the redeployments already agreed upon in the other accords. Because for him, it was first of all essential that Israel fulfill the commitments they had already undertaken in order to demonstrate that they were trust building, right? So like a lot of what would have to happen between Iran and America would be trust building. That's what the scheduling is about. It's building. Listen, if I've ever learnt anything in therapy, it's that it's very important for us to have positive experiences, right? To change our thinking about things. So, we do these sort of scheduling things because the last couple of meetings and agreements that Iran and Israel that Iran and the US had, Iran ended up getting its shit fucked every time they sat down at the table. So we're in a low trust situation now, which means we need to have some good experiences to rebuild that trust. We need to have America promising something and then following through, and we need to have Iran promising something and then following through so that both sides demonstrate that they can be true to their word. Okay? Hi, Ali. Sorry, couldn't get my YouTube to work. So this is a crazy thing to say. It's like, hey, I know we have no trust and I know we've fucked you over every step of the way, but let's not do any of that trust building. You can explain it to your people and we're just gonna fucking do it all at once. Good when it came to fulfilling their commitments, but also he felt that that land had already been negotiated. So whatever they move forward to talking about should be a separate thing. When asked about Barak, thank you so much, sweet Ali. Thank you for investing a moral coin. Also, I'm a Twitch partner now. Did you see? Did you see I got a purple badge? I'm a big deal around here. I'm a huge deal, actually. Also, I put up an Instagram reel because I do short form content now as of tonight. So if you have Instagram, you should like my reel. Okay, yeah. So this is the other thing, right? Because with the Y memorandum and with a lot of these interim documents that were being created under the Oslo Accords, Netanyahu had been really sneaky and tried to like rearrange, like wherever he could sneak a little bit of land out of the agreement, he would, right? So now, with Barak saying, we'll just sort it all at the end, it's like, no, because we've got more land to sort at the end. This land was already decided upon. We should get this land because we already decided we got this land, right? So give us the land that's already agreed upon. Don't try and bundle it in at the end as part of what you're giving us because that's a totally separate discussion. So it's another sneaky little trying to get a little cut around the edges sort of shit, you know? Palestinian Foreign Minister Saeb Erekat, he said that he believed Barak to be an upright and sincere man, but he emphasized that when it came to the Palestinians' point of view, there was no more leeway, that Palestinian society had lost all hope for peace, that over the past years, it has been literally suffocated and humiliated. He said, "We are ready to begin negotiations on the definitive status, but there is no question of integrating them into the implementation of the Y Accord. You can't say that time stopped in November 1998 and that you are now asking for 22 weeks to implement this accord instead of 11 weeks. The Oslo period had really tainted how the Palestinians viewed peace negotiations. And to be fair, it also tainted how the Israelis viewed the peace negotiations. There were failures on both sides. Timetables hadn't been adhered to, redeployments weren't executed or were only executed in part, prisoners weren't released. Because think about it, right? And this is why this trust building is so important, because when you fail, right, when you don't live up to the agreement you've made to the other side, what also happens is that the leaders who are doing the negotiating lose credibility with their people and lose credibility with the militants within their people. So let's say Pezeshkian and Ghalibaf were able to organize a scheduling thing. If America failed to commit to what they promised they would deliver, then the IRGC would be able to go and say, look, we told you, there's no point in negotiating with them. They don't do what they say they're going to do. And it motivates them to do more outrageous things, right? So in the case of Israel-Palestine, what you had is people like Hamas who were spoilers. They never wanted the Oslo Accords. They didn't agree with the Oslo Accords. They thought that the Oslo Accords gave away far too much. The Oslo Accords were a bad deal for Palestine. You had people like Edward Said who didn't like the Oslo Accords. Lots of Palestinians were against the Oslo Accords and they didn't trust that anything would happen. And so every time Israel failed to meet something that was agreed upon in the Accords, it emboldened that position. Why the fuck shouldn't we? Hamas is out there saying the only thing these people listen to is violence. So we're going to do violence. And then they do violence, and people on the Israeli side within the citizenry are saying, why the fuck are we negotiating with terrorists? We literally have a peace accord with these bitches. They're fucking blowing us up. Why the fuck would we keep talking to them? So when you make a schedule, when you make an agreement, and then you fuck up the agreement, it gets harder. After every missed step, it gets harder to get buy-in. And it gets harder for the people who do believe in the process. More and more opposition mounts to them as well. Settlements continued to grow and create facts on the ground that ultimately prevented partition in any sort of simple or contiguous way. The settler movement in Israel had become overwhelmingly powerful. No government could really wholly be committed to the Oslo Agreement because they also had to represent the settler movement. So issues that had been settled were constantly being reopened. And of course, as you know, with Netanyahu, there were constant efforts. And that's the other problem, right? The more time delay happens, the more facts on the ground can change, and that can be incidental or intentional. So in the case of the settler movement, let's build a bunch of settlements so there's no way to easily divide up the land. Then it's not just a matter of I don't want to fulfill this promise that I made within this agreement. It's, holy fuck, how do I? Because the situation, because Netanyahu, for instance, refused to do anything on Oslo while he was in power, and pushed people to disrupt as much as possible while he was in power. By the time Ehud Barak comes in, it's like, okay, actually fulfilling this agreement is kind of difficult now because the facts on the ground are significantly different. I'm dealing with this extremely powerful political movement, but a movement that's physically entrenched themselves in the geographic area that I'm meant to be dealing with as a part of this negotiation. It's to just avoid serious discussions. When decisions were made, they were made unilaterally. In the first 8 years of the peace process, the settler population increased by over 80%. And that population growth was, of course, matched by a broader deployment of the IDF to protect them, greater control of roads, and greater reports of violence by settlers against Palestinians and their property. But the Palestinians also violated the agreement. They enlarged their armed forces far beyond what was agreed to. They let militias strengthen under their watch. And Arafat, just like Netanyahu, was out there making comments that contradicted this spirit of Oslo. That said, the Palestinian Authority did try their best to stop terrorist attacks perpetrated by... This is what I mean, though. When people are getting angry and shit doesn't feel like it's changing, it's tough, man. It's tough. Because you need to keep credibility within your people to be able to be a partner for peace, right? You need to actually be a representative that people, like, they give you the right to negotiate on their behalf, so you need to keep them happy. But then at the same time, sometimes doing that makes people go, well, what do you mean you're out there saying, like, fuck Israel? And then you expect us to talk to you? It's like, bro, you're fucking up. I have to say it. Otherwise, they think I'm just not saying it. And then they don't trust me anymore. Exactly, Evan. Exactly, Evan. Various groups, but there were some strange loopholes. Well, they would condemn terrorist acts against Israel proper. They were a bit more lenient about attacks on settlers and the IDF. For the Palestinians, they really thought, well, it's better to endorse this blueprint of his and be good sports and be on board than reject it in public. That's only going to further damage political negotiations. On September... At what age did you start getting into this, Joe? I remember basically when 9/11 happened, I went down. I studied Israel-Palestine in year 12 in my modern history class. And then I was so interested in it that was like the main focus of my university degree. It was like Middle Eastern politics and strategic security, but with a focus on Israel-Palestine. Then I worked for the Palestinian delegation. September 4th, 1999, the Palestinian and Israeli leadership negotiated a framework agreement. This ended with the signing of the Sharm el-Sheikh Memorandum. The Israeli government and the Palestinian Authority committed themselves to a full and mutual implementation of the interim agreement and all other agreements since 1993. In addition, provisions were made for 2 new agreements. So the first agreement was a framework agreement, and that defined the commitments of the parties, and it would also spell out or that's what we want, a framework agreement. Clarify existing dispute. The second agreement would be the final status agreement. That was it. So that first framework agreement was to be concluded by February 13, 2000, and the second final agreement was to be concluded by September 13 of 2000. There were some redeployments agreed upon and some prisoner releases agreed upon as part of Sharm el-Sheikh as well. There was an agreement that there would be safe corridors built between Gaza and the West Bank. With this memorandum in hand, the Israeli leaders and the Palestinian leaders went off and started proclaiming their own interpretations. Lord ennui, I also know it's not ennui, but my brain has decided that that's what I'm reading when I look at your name. And I'm past the point in my life where when my brain makes a decision, it's easy for me to change it. So in the same way that there's someone in here often named casual refractor, but I call them causal refractor. It's very hard for me. You may just end up being Lord Ennui. Lord Oini. I'll try Oini, I'll try my best, but you may be Ennui. Palestinians highlighted that 13th of September 2000, that would be it. But in Israel, it was more of a planning thing. Barak did try to explain his strategy to the Knesset on September 8th. He said the implementation of the Y memorandum was harmful to the political interests of the state of Israel. This way, we don't have to adhere to that. We've got a new schedule that we can sort of manipulate. But the second that Sharm el-Sheikh memorandum was signed, the wall-to-wall coalition that Barak had built began to fall apart. So literally, this is the problem, right? This is what I'm talking about in terms of like, you need to keep the backing of your people, and in Israel's case, you need to keep your coalition government, so you need the backing of other politicians. But also, like, even when you do the exact right thing, right? So here Barak is saying to his coalition government, I just saved us. We were about to have to hand over all of this land because it had been agreed upon. That was the next thing that we had to do. And I got them to rip that up to sign this new planning document where we actually have room to negotiate and maybe get some of that land back. I did the good thing. But his coalition is saying, you signed an agreement with them, fuck you, it's over. Like, that is how precarious this situation is. Even when you're doing the right thing, if on its face they don't like how it looks, you're fucked. But you can't really afford to be fucked, because the second you're out, the whole thing goes to shit. And this also happens again, by the way, under, what is that other president's name? Prime Minister's name. And he thinks he's the best. He thinks he's the most liberal. He thinks he basically had an agreement. Anyway, he made basically, and he offered something to the Palestinians, and he's always like, and they didn't take it. And we could have had peace. I offered them the best deal they ever got. And it's like, bro, you lost government the next day. So even if they'd accepted it, like, you weren't in power to implement it. What's it? We accept a deal and then we hope that your party continued. Like, you lost power. You were voted out with a vote of no confidence. What is the point of making a deal with someone who doesn't have the authority to make the deal? You can talk about what a great guy you were and what a great deal you offered. You didn't have the authority to offer the deal in any kind of meaningful way. You were no longer prime minister. In the Knesset, the Shah's party didn't even show up to vote about the memorandum. The National Religious Party and the Russian Party voted against it, and the Orthodox Party had already quit the coalition because Barak had made a decision to allow slow-moving heavy equipment on the roads over Sabbath. To Barak's credit, 199 prisoners were released on September 9th, with one choosing to remain as a matter of solidarity. So he did show the Palestinians that he was able to stick to a schedule. On September 16, Arafat names his delegation. So the delegation is led by Yasser Abed Rabo, who is the Minister for Culture and Information, and it also includes Nabil Sheikh, Faisal Al-Husseini, Minister for Jerusalem Affairs, Nabil Kassis, who took part in the Madrid conference, and Akram Haniyeh, who is not related to Ismail Haniyeh of Hamas. But the same day that Arafat announces who will be a part of the Palestinian delegation, he receives word that 42 new settlements have been created in the West Bank without authorization. Now, Ehud Barak talks to the settlement council, but he ultimately agrees to give construction permits to 30 of them and orders the other 12 to be evacuated. But when the IDF goes to evacuate those settlers, they refuse to evacuate, and Barak doesn't really push the matter. On October 5, the agreement for a safe corridor between Gaza and the West Bank is finalized, and 10 days later, 150 prisoners are released from Israeli jail. The Palestinian public are a little bit disappointed because only 109 of those prisoners end up being Palestinian, but nonetheless, things are looking good. Barak is implementing things that he agreed to in Sharm el-Sheikh. On October 25, this trend continues. Barak sticks to his commitment to open a safe passage between the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. Now, this was a crucial stage of the interim agreement, and this was a really important thing to the Palestinian leadership because it was seen as a crucial part of the interim agreement, and the opposition in Palestine had always talked about how Israel would never allow the connection between these two areas. They'd never allow free movement. So this was not only something of practical significance, but it had really important political significance because it showed that the diplomatic channel, which had pretty much been at a standstill between the two, was now up and running again. I do have to say, this passage didn't end up going very well. But this is the thing, right? Now people can get on board. Now it's harder for Hamas to make their case when Fatah is able to say, look what we're getting. Look, we got all these people released. We got the thing that you said was impossible to get. We got it. Right? Unfortunately, the story doesn't go well from here. Because the economic situation in the two areas is very different. So it ultimately didn't work the way that people had thought it would work, but that's beside the point for the moment. Basically, people in Gaza were really poor, and people in the West Bank were better off. And a lot of people from Gaza ended up kind of like going and slumming in the West Bank and like trying to take all the work, and it ended up like creating tension between the two areas. Instead of it being this like great thing that connected people, it created this like weird economic situation where the West Bank kind of felt like they were being infiltrated by Gazans. It's complicated. point is, Ehud Barak opened a passage, the Southern Corridor. On the 3rd of November, a schedule was drawn up for the discussions that would have to take place prior to the Framework Accord being signed in February of the next year. The same day, Barak finally announces his delegation. Originally, he really wanted Gilad Shia to head his negotiation team, his delegation, but this was vetoed by Eliakim Rubinstein. I hope I'm saying that right. He was the... Do you think the Israelis knew that would happen between Gaza and the West Bank? I don't think so. I think the fact that Ehud Barak got that going at, like, look, I think Ehud Barak gets way too much credit for this whole thing because this was a massive fuck up. But the fact that he managed to get a highway when, like, literally everyone was quitting the coalition left, right, and center, I really don't even think, even if they knew that would happen, it wouldn't have been a selling point. People were so against it. Like, as I said with the Sharm el Sheikh, he's literally saying, guys, I only did Sharm el Sheikh to get rid of the Y memorandum. Like, I saved us. I actually did something great. This is going to fuck them long term. Like, just think strategically with me. They were still upset. So even if Ehud Barak had been like, guys, we're going to open this corridor and they're going to hate it and it's going to fucking suck for them, people would be like, I don't want them connected. Because it was any step, any agreement with the Palestinians was seen as the wrong thing. So it didn't matter if it would be bad for them. The fact that they wanted it was the problem. Government's legal counsel, and he didn't really want Shia because Shia wasn't part of the civil service. So instead, Barak chose Odin Eran to head the delegation. He was the Israeli ambassador to Jordan, and the rest of the team was made up of Shlomo Yanai, Daniel Reisner, Alan Baker, and Pini Medan. Reserve General Uri Sagai was also appointed to be in charge of the Syria issue. The first talks between Odin Eran and Yasser Abed Rabo take place on November 8th in Ramallah. Eran agrees that United Nations Security Council Resolution 242 should probably be the basis of the talks, and Abed Rabo outlines what the core issues are from the Palestinian point of view. East Jerusalem should fall within the 1967 lines. Settlements need to go, water needs to be shared, and the refugee problem needs to be resolved in a way that aligns with UN Security Council Resolution 194? Yes. Oh, and maybe there might be some damages that were negotiated. Up until this point, everything seems to be going fine. Everything is going pretty well. And then on November 9, Arafat and Barak have a 15-minute conversation in Paris, and it is obvious that they are no longer on friendly terms. Barak states in a press conference that people want to know what happened in the lift with Solange and Beyonce. I want to know what Arafat and Barak talked about in Paris. That Resolution 242 doesn't apply to the West Bank, since its previous annexation by Jordan in 1948 was not recognised by the international community. And from this point, things kind of take a turn in the negotiations between the Israelis and the Palestinians. On November 10, some settlers are evacuated from an illegal settlement near Hebron called Havat Ma'on. They resist being removed, and images of them fighting are broadcast all over the media. And this makes the Israeli public who are watching these images become increasingly apprehensive about future withdrawals. What will happen? How violent will they get? Barak approves the withdrawal for the next day, but it's rejected by Arafat because he did that unilaterally. It was based on a map that Israel came up with that they hadn't consulted Palestine over. So he was like, this is where something you don't think about, right? But this is where, when people say Barak lacks tact, Barak is a military man, Barak isn't a natural diplomat, like, this is where it comes in, because he's like, okay, fine, well, I'm just going to do a removal. And, like, in his mind, he's like, why would Palestine ever object to that? Like, I am doing something they want. This is good. This is for them. It's like, we haven't agreed on land. Like, we need to be doing this together, bro. It's a group project. He's like, the job just needs to be done. No, the job can't just be done by you because you're making decisions about us. So this is one of those things where personality ends up playing a role. Don't really want you to do that because we haven't discussed that. We have to consult about these things. And that kind of marks the end of Israel-Palestine negotiations for a little while. Once we get to December, Barak's attention is 100% on Syria. Palestine has faded into the background because he got it into his head that if he could reach an agreement with Syria, he'd be in a better position to negotiate on Palestine. And Hafez Assad had signaled to the Americans that he was ready and willing to negotiate a peace accord with Israel. Barak's obsession with peace of Syria was wasn't shared by those around him, particularly literally Matthew. Like, I was thinking about it and I was like, we should watch this video, because I just don't think, like, I was watching a lot of TikToks and they were like, so the ceasefire is over, no deal was reached. And I was like, okay, we just need a better understanding of how negotiations kind of work. Like, we need more views of, oh, look at my freeze frame, doing myself a dirty. Not just successes either. Like, we need to look at failures and how they failed so we can understand what makes a successful negotiation, where things can go wrong. People in the military leaders and key people from Shin Bet, including Ami Ayalon, Ephraim Halevi, Amos Malka, they all asked Barak to prioritize Palestine. This is because they were concerned that another intifada would happen, and that this time, when it broke out, they'd be better armed, they'd have more equipment, and they'd be more upset than the first intifada. Literally what you just said, Matthew. Everyone in the military in Israel is saying, please do not focus on Syria right now. Please focus on Palestine, because Palestine, what are the three options? Delay, escalate, negotiate. If you don't negotiate and you delay, they will escalate. Please just focus on the negotiations with Palestine. He's like, no. I'm going to delay, and I'm going to go and change the facts on the ground by talking to Syria. And they're like, please don't. Please don't. It's like they could see the future. So in December, when Barak is getting all hyped about this Syria idea, a newspaper publishes a survey of the Knesset. The Golan Heights is considered by Syria to be occupied Syrian territory. So any peace negotiation with Syria is going to involve some sort of negotiation about getting the Golan Heights back. 54 deputies are against withdrawal from the Golan and 53 are for it. And 3 of those in support, Shlomo Ben Ami, Mathan Vilnai, and Amon Lipkin Shahak, are shaky in their support. Like, I am shaky in the pronunciation of their names. So when Barak announces to the chamber that Israel is ready to sign peace with Syria, he does so with the support of only 47 deputies. Demonstrations break out in front of the Knesset, and members of Israel Ba'aliyah, Likud, and the Shas, they all speak to the crowd. They criticize Barak. They criticize any prospect of an agreement with Syria. Ariel Sharon is the head of Likud, so he's also the leader of the opposition, and he says Assad is a tyrant and a cruel dictator. Whenever you see a picture and it looks a little bit dark, it's because I had intended to put the quote over the top. So here I put basic title to put the quote in. But yes, Barak is a traitor. He's, Barak, ready to give up the Golan without demanding anything in return, just to distract attention away from the economic failures of his government. So not much support, right, in Israel from either... some people don't mind, but there is a loud set of people who really do mind, and he doesn't have the support of a majority of government. Were it not for the withdrawal from the Golan, most of the Israeli public would support peace with Syria. On December 15, Barak flies into Washington. He is there to do this peace summit with Syria. He's met on the tarmac by Assistant Secretary of State Martin Indyk. Barak immediately tells Indyk, I cannot do it. I cannot make a deal. It is too quick. I have to take my time. My people, they're not ready. Even so, the Syrians and the Israelis agree to hold another round of talks in January. Barisa Guy, the guy I mentioned before who was the head of Syria. Do you know how pissed I'd be if I was like, yeah, I'll host a peace negotiation. You fly all the way to me just to tell me on the tarmac you don't want to do it? Blood the fuck up, bro. I know, I don't have that plan anymore because I clearly didn't order it. Rest in peace. It's okay though, they're having another talk in January. Area negotiations. He doesn't like that the talks are so public. He thinks it makes things more complicated. He also doesn't like that Barak is involved because Assad isn't involved. So Barak is talking to the Syrian foreign minister and he thinks that looks bad, that Barak insists on being involved. He has to be involved. He's a bit of a leader that insists on being involved even though it's not the best for the situation. A leader that insists on being the one to make the deal even though everyone around him is saying, hey, that doesn't look good, can you not do that? We'd rather send in the foreign minister and the people. Crazy. Micromanager in this way, which is another part of his personality that makes it really hard for anyone to kind of make progress in peace talks, because a lot of the time, if his negotiating team went out and agree on something, they'll present it back to Barak and he'll veto it so he kind of has to be involved in anything. Uri Sagai wants the talks to continue in secret, but that can't happen if Barak is involved. So the talks take a turn for the worse. Al-Sharer, the Syrian foreign minister, wants 4 committees. One on borders, one on water, one on security, and one on normalization. And he wants all of these committees to negotiate simultaneously. So Syria is pushing forward. They're like, here are our ideas, but Barak is frozen by the fact that he knows he has no support at home. So the talks really come to a standstill, or at least Barak is making it really hard for there to be any progress. Barak's like, I need to be in the spotlight, but no, Trump is sending in his clowns because Trump will only be there if a deal is going to happen, right? So the basic way to understand it is if no negotiations are going to happen, he'll send Kushner and Witkoff. If negotiations are going to happen, but they're going to fail, he'll send Vance, because any opportunity to embarrass that man, he will take. If negotiations are going to happen and they'll be successful, he himself will go. But the problem is Trump keeps doing these Truth Social things. He keeps insisting on being so deeply involved, like even sending Vance or Witkoff or Kushner, they're not the people who should be going, right? The people should be going are the people who have trained their whole life to do this exact job. The people who should be going, Marco Rubio should be there, right? Like, people like that should be there. But weirdly, his real estate friend is there, his son-in-law is there, and occasionally he sends the man he likes to embarrass. But he also likes to do all of his diplomacy over Truth Social and freak everybody out. Imagine sending an actual diplomat who spent their whole life training for this exact moment. No, just send your son-in-law and your buddy. But yeah, in the same situation here, it's like Barak is like, oh, no, I have to go. But when I get there, I'm going to be completely neurotic because all I'm really focused on is my own political survival. And every single conversation we have here, I'm going to purely think of it through the frame of the fact that it will end my time as Prime Minister. Rubio doesn't agree. He never wanted this. Rubio wants out of fucking the Middle East and he wants to be in. Was Kushner helpful at all of the Abraham Accords? It depends if you think the Abraham Accords are a good thing. It depends if you think the Abraham Accords have helped things in the Middle East. Yeah, Rubio wants to focus on Cuba. Rubio never wanted to be the Ayatollah. That's what it comes down to, okay? Once you realize that Rubio is already running Venezuela and he has intentions to run Cuba, you'll understand that he's upset at the very idea of being Ayatollah. Okay, he can't run that many places. The thing is, I mean, from Israel's point of view, obviously the Abraham Accords rocks. But again, you have to understand the personal relationship of the fact that the Kushners and the Netanyahus are so extremely close that Netanyahu stayed at the Kushner's house whenever he visited America. In fact, there were many times when he slept in Jared Kushner's bed and Jared Kushner as a teenager would go and sleep in the basement so that Bibi could have his bed. So when you are the person who is designing a deal for peace between Middle Eastern states and Israel, and that is your relationship with the leader of Israel, it's kind of a glaringly obvious thing to everyone you were trying to get to sign that peace deal. Like whose benefits you're kind of keeping front of mind. No, that's bullshit. That's not true. I mean, yeah, I think that normalization was a real concern, avocadorable, between Saudi and Israel, and Hamas were thinking if Saudi and Israel normalize, then there's no powerful Arab state really on our side anymore, and we've been totally forgotten, and we've been totally fucked. But yeah. The professional diplomats did nothing. They just did the JCPOA. They didn't do anything for Israel in terms of Israel's normalization with other Middle Eastern countries because they weren't willing to cut Palestine out of the deal. Because most US governments have said, hey, we were instrumental in this deal. We were instrumental in constructing the idea of a two-state solution. So to put that in the bin right now would be to go back on decades of our diplomatic work in the region. And Jared Kushner was like, fuck Palestine. Who gives a shit? Let's just normalize with all the money countries. So yeah, I guess Kushner did come along and do things. But it involves like not caring about doing the right thing, not caring about upholding your diplomatic history, I mean, sure. Kushner did great things for Israel, yes. Yes. On the 13th of January, in order to try and get some progress, Syria makes some concessions regarding the border and working with Israel to better control Hezbollah. But the document outlining these concessions is published in full in Haaretz, which is an Israeli newspaper, and Assad is humiliated domestically. Clinton calls Assad to try and fix things on January 15 because the second that happens, he breaks off all contact with Israel. He is... The 13th of January, in order to try and get some progress, Syria makes some concessions. So remember how I said, in order for the negotiations between Iran and the United States to progress at this stage, someone is going to have to make a strategic concession. Someone is going to have to show some flexibility. It can be private, but someone is going to have to make a concession in order for negotiations to continue. So when we look back to the Syria-Israel things, Hafez Assad says, let's make some concessions to get the ball rolling. It's regarding the border and working with Israel to better control Hezbollah. But the document outlining these concessions is published in full in Haaretz, which is an Israeli newspaper, and Assad is humiliated domestically. Clinton calls Assad to try and fix things on January 15 because the second that happens, he breaks off all contact with Israel. He is done. Clinton tries to persuade him to send a delegation to resume talks, but Assad won't do it. He is done. Based on accounts from Dennis Ross and Bill Clinton from the very beginning of the talks between Israel and Syria, it was clear to the American team that Barack had completely walked back from his former position regarding Syria. The US can stop the blockade on the blockade, and that would get the talks rolling again. That would be the concession that needs to be made. And while the Syrians were willing to compromise and consider the US draft for peace, Barack was intent on not making any sort of deal while he was there. Clinton said, the Syrians responded positively, and we began meetings on border and security issues. Again, the Syrians showed flexibility on both matters, saying they would accept an adjustment on the strip of land bordering Galilee to as much as 50 meters, provided that Israel accepted the June 4 line as the basis for discussion. I was encouraged, but it quickly became apparent that Barack had still not authorized anyone on his team to accept June 4, no matter what the Syrians offered. Syria had shown flexibility on what Israel wanted, providing its needs were met. Israel had not responded in kind. Shimon Peres, who was a key many such cases, negotiator from Oslo, and was not allowed to be involved in Barack's team of negotiators, said, of all our prime ministers, Barack is the one who least understood Palestinians. After 3 years dealing with Netanyahu's procrastinations, and when placing so much hope in the man who would be Rabin's successor, to stake everything on Syria was an error with disastrous consequences. But, so Shimon Peres, who you just saw, the first time that Netanyahu wins, he is running against Netanyahu. And it fucking sucks because he really had a shot, but a few things, like there was a terrorist attack basically a couple of days before the election, Palestinian terrorist attack in Israel. And obviously since the very beginning of time, Netanyahu has been Mr. Security, where Shimon Peres was seen as like very favorable to the Palestinians, and so it kind of fucked him majorly and he lost. But in my view, the situation in Israel and Palestine would be totally different if Shimon Peres had won that election. Because Netanyahu destroyed the process. No, I'm not saying it's a false flag. I'm just saying it's like a very unfortunate situation because there were other reasons that Shimon Peres lost as well. It's just that's, to me, that's the obvious main reason. But like, it's such a shame because, yeah, I think we'd be in a totally different position. But he's right. He's saying, this is such an unfair... Why did you do this? These people have been fucked for 3 years under Netanyahu as he has done absolutely nothing. No progress. Backtracking. The opposite of progress. While he has literally rewritten line by line every sense of the Oslo peace agreement. They have had nothing. And then you run on the idea that you're going to be the one to bring peace, only to say, no, you don't get any interim agreements, you have to wait, and then stop negotiations to go and focus on Syria, and then fuck over Syria. You don't, like, you're, how were you thinking? What were you thinking? What were you thinking? Even everyone in your military said don't do this, and you did it anyway. By the time we get to January of 2000, the Palestinians are completely disenchanted, completely frustrated. The timetable that they'd agreed to in the Sharm el-Sheikh agreement for redeployments hadn't been observed, or negotiation hadn't been observed. But Barak had also been focusing on Syria, which made the Palestinians feel like they weren't being taken seriously, that they weren't important. It felt like, at this stage, a repeat of... When you're playing a game, you usually have an opponent. How do you organize your thinking when you're writing about or critiquing a situation? What do you mean, Evan? I want to answer the question, but I don't understand it. Netanyahu's term. Since coming to power, Barak had issued over 3,196 new invitations to tender bids for constructions in the settlements. Like before, the Palestinians waited, saw no redeployments, saw no prisoner releases, and the continued growth of settlements. Barak's public declarations about what he was not willing to negotiate on, paired with the extremely tight rein that he kept on his negotiators, meant that Arafat and his team eventually concluded that Israel was... Yeah, so we support you to get in. You do nothing. The only thing you really do is give a speech about what you're not willing to do. And then you make us wait and just trust it. Like, come on. Like, talking about strategies. When you're playing a game, you usually have an opponent. How do you... Do you mean... Okay, I think my confusion is, what do you mean by you here? Is it you, me? As in, how do I? Or is it the general you? How does one? Are you asking when I write about a situation how I critique it? Or how do I... What are you asking me? Rejecting every opportunity to make progress with them. And this was upsetting because, as I said, Arafat had agreed with Clinton that he wouldn't rise to Netanyahu's bait in the final period of Netanyahu's term. So yeah, but in return for this, Arafat... Yeah, so because of what happened with Shimon Peres, as I told you before, a terrorist attack happened and it basically cost Shimon Peres the election, because how does Netanyahu win elections? Things happen. He's Mr. Security. He's the tough guy. He's tough on crime. He's tough on Palestinians. He's tough on terrorism. So you get Mr. Security in. Best thing for him that can happen is for something really bad to happen. So Netanyahu, towards the end of that election period against Ehud Barak, was kind of baiting Palestinians. He was kind of trying to create the environment to encourage a terrorist attack because that's what he needed to win. And Clinton was talking to Arafat behind the scenes saying, please, 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 keep your people on hold, because when we get this new prime minister, everything will be better. Please, this guy's he's gonna take the process seriously. So, like, Arafat at this stage is are you fucking kidding me? This guy. Imagining how things will play out when one is trying to understand all the players. When you're playing a game, you usually have an opponent. How do you organize your thinking when you're writing about critiquing a situation? Like talking about strategies. Imagining how things will play out when one's trying to understand all the players. I still don't fully understand this question. I think you're asking, like, I guess if I'm trying to work out what you're saying, right? To critique the situation, you need to understand the rules of the game, how the game ought to be played, right? Like, so for instance, the thing that I keep talking about, which is like most conflicts have 3 moves: escalate, negotiate, delay. right? Especially in this situation. They're the three moves that we have. Then we have the win conditions for both sides. We have the win conditions within the war. We have the win conditions generally. Then we have our levels: strategy, operation, tactics. And then we have the personalities of both the states and the people leading the states. And so you can kind of be like, okay, so we've got three moves, right? Donald Trump, we know, the leader of the US, is always picking delay. Escalate doesn't work for America because it'll increase body count, it'll look really bad for the midterms, it won't change facts on the ground really. Negotiate doesn't work because Donald Trump thinks that diplomacy's for pussies and he's not willing to give anything. So diplomacy's not going to work right now. So he's going to delay. How does delay work for Iran? Well, delay has been something that they've been happy to do so far because in a game of mercy, they can outweight everyone. But if delay is now indefinite and we're just going to be left in this murky, unclear sort of stalemate, that isn't going to work for Iran because, yes, economically, they can take that, but over time, they don't want to just get hit again in a year or 2 years. Or that's no way for a country to thrive, and eventually Iran will become a failed state under those conditions. So ideally, even though the win condition formally is just for the regime to survive, the win condition is actually to come out with an agreement that guarantees some sort of security for Iran in the future. So delay, if it is indefinite, is not a tactic that is going to work for Iran. In terms of negotiate, there are certain things they're willing to negotiate on, but the demand currently is the strait, which they will not negotiate on. So we're back to escalate. That's the only way that they can change the facts on the ground for the war. So that's kind of how I think about things. In terms of this, it's much easier looking at something like Camp David because it's done. You know? So I see how everything happened. That's less, so then when I'm looking back at something, it's not so much predictive in any way. It's not looking at like, oh, how do we get to a goal? It's like, how did we get to this fuck up? How did this happen instead? It's looking at why were the choices that were made? So in this case, a lot of the time it's because, one, there are personality flaws in Ehud Barak, which meant that he wasn't a good diplomat, and just the reality of building a wall-to-wall coalition, meaning that you're constantly in a state of precarity, which means you really can't make a deal. If I may take a stab, I've spent 40 years studying strategy. Understanding strategy for me is a generalist thing. You can apply it to any situation. However, in order to reapply it to a specific situation, you need knowledge on how the players in the situation play the game and know the history having led up to now in order to make analysis of that specific situation. I think that's very true. I think that's much more eloquent than what I said. But yeah, you need the generalist kind of framework of like, this is strategy and this is how this game is played. And then you need to apply the knowledge of the players and the history that kind of creates the context. Okay, so like, how do you know how the players work? That's interesting. So for instance, like, let's look at the current leadership in Iran. One thing that I've said a lot over the past couple of streams is, if you look at the new leadership in most of Iran's regime, you will see that they come from the IRGC or they're friendly with the IRGC, and a lot of them spent their early 20s fighting in the Iran-Iraq war. That is important knowledge to have, right? Because what happened in the Iran-Iraq war, right? What were some of the takeaways from the Iran-Iraq war? Once you understand how people in the IRGC felt about the Iran-Iraq war, that's going to tell you something psychologically about the leadership in charge at the moment. So when you understand, for instance, that they felt that Khomeini was tricked into signing a ceasefire, that he got a bad deal, that he shouldn't have signed a peace agreement, that's telling you immediately, I don't feel that the new regime is necessarily geared more towards peace than the former regime. So like little bits of knowledge like that can really help you. Or the fact that Khamenei Jr. hates Arabs. Not sure of his dad. That's going to change the calculations when it comes to attacking the Gulf, right? The fact that sanctions have been applied for a very long time to Iran means that economic punishment is something they're ready to withstand. So that's where the history kind of comes in as well. Yeah, I don't know if that's helpful. And then in terms of Trump, it's just patterns of behavior. Like when people say like Trump always chickens out, it's like, well, no, Trump delays. He threatens, but he delays. Because the threatening is trying to force the hand of the other side. When they don't do it, he delays because he doesn't want to negotiate, but he also doesn't really want to escalate. But yeah, Lord Oini, something that I always say as well is, what do I say? The problem of international relations is over rationalization, right? This is the number one problem you have with anyone in strategic security or international relations. They do have a tendency, and I am critiquing myself here as well, and that's why I get so nervous about making any sort of predictions. Because once you think you're like, I know the rules, I know the players, I know the history, I know everything I need to know. No, you don't. Because you're dealing with like a chemical reaction. No matter how much you know, you don't know. You don't know. And like the Cuban Missile Crisis is actually a really good example of this. It's like so many things come down to a single decision, which really could go either way, right? So many wars are created by the situation becoming so tense and then one mistake being made. You don't know where the mistakes are going to be made. So even if you feel like, this is my problem with Elbridge Colby, for instance, I feel that he has thought everything through, and rationally he can see how everything should go. But we're not in an environment that is controlled like that. So you can rationally know how things are supposed to go, but I always talk about 9/11, because I'm so fascinated by so many elements that could have, like, what do you mean that in the flight towers they were doing tests that day? There was a test environment for what would happen if a plane was being hijacked, so that half the people on the phones were saying, hang on, is this the drill or is this real life? Like, what? How do you don't even know? They didn't know that. The hijackers didn't know that, right? And so, like, there are so many things, like, you can do your best to try and give, like, running analysis, and I'm doing my best. I am a human being. I'm not an Iran expert. I'm not in the army. I'm not an intelligence agent. So I'm doing my best as an outside observer, right? But it always gets dangerous when you get excited and start making predictions. But you know what? Fuck, it feels good to be right. Oh, and that's why so many people make the mistake, because you want to say, I know exactly how this is going to go, and you want to tell people. And yeah, it feels great when it's right, but history is made by people who get up in the morning. I feel unknown knowns were forgotten to be taken into account. Yeah. Yeah, World War I gunshot, knowing that would happen is impossible, but knowing it could happen and it wouldn't take much can be known. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, you do know you're building up to a situation. So that's what I mean with this, like, precarious kind of or very hostile stalemate that we're in. It's like, okay, yeah, technically the ceasefire has been extended indefinitely, but you can look at the situation enough right now to say, this isn't tenable for Iran, so they will escalate if pushed. And you are creating an environment where they will escalate. Anyway, back to Israel. If you don't know now, you know. Exactly. That had expected good faith, waited, saw no redeployments, saw no prisoner releases, and the continued growth of settlements. Barak's public declarations about what he was not willing to negotiate on, paired with the extremely tight rein that he kept on his negotiators, meant that Arafat and his team eventually concluded that Israel was rejecting every opportunity to make progress with them. And this was upsetting because, as I said, Arafat had agreed with Clinton that he wouldn't rise to Netanyahu's bait in the final period of Netanyahu's term. But in return for this, Arafat had expected good faith and swift negotiations on the peace process. The redeployment of 5% of the West Bank, which was supposed to have taken place on November 15th, hadn't happened. This is because there was once again disagreements about the map. The areas designated for redeployment had been small, isolated areas. With fucking maps, bro. And this is what I mean when I say, like, negotiations take a long time. With Iran, like, it was a good sign, for instance, when Iran brought in more people. Because that usually means you're flying in technical experts. And great freeze frame again for me. So in this situation, right, during all of these months, ideally, you want technical experts going over these maps so that when you get to the stage of redeployment, there is an agreement. Because all of your map guys, right, they've been mapping. They've been doing the maps. So this also go back to Ehud Olmert, the one who's like, I gave them the best deal ever. He showed them a map and asked them to agree to it, and wouldn't let them take the map. They were like, he was like, you have to agree to it here in the room. You're not allowed to take the map. It's like, okay. We need to take the map to our map guy, though. Because we don't have the map knowledge to make an agreement about the map. We need to take it to our map people. No. Make an agreement here, now. You have till 9 a.m. to accept it. And by the way, by the time you accept it, I'll no longer be Prime Minister. But I'll forever tell everyone that you not accepting it was the biggest mistake that Palestine ever made. Yeah, so Matthew, the one thing I'll tell you about Iran is that doing any sort of technical negotiation with them is apparently, from what I've heard from JCPOA negotiators, is like trench warfare. They'll go word by word. And that's why I said as well with the former Ayatollah, with Ali Khamenei, to be a little bit dubious when people invoke his fatwa as a clear and obvious sign that he never wanted to have nuclear weapons. I'm like, I don't know. Khamenei was a little cute with the wording around that sort of thing. The wording often changed. The wording often created little loopholes where it was like, well, no, we would never want to have a nuclear weapon. But having the highly enriched uranium to create a nuclear weapon, that's not the same as having a nuclear weapon. Having the technology and the knowledge of how to build a nuclear weapon, that's not the same as a nuclear weapon. Having the launch pads, having the weapon we'd attach the nuclear material to, that's not a nuclear weapon. Having all of the parts and all of the knowledge of how to put together the parts is not the same as having a nuclear weapon. And I technically am not going to put a fatwa on any of that. And you know what? I might even change my mind at some points and say, we can have a nuclear weapon, we just can't use it. That's what I meant when I said that. So it's like, they're very tricky with words. And words are important. Language philosopher. Words are very important. Words create reality. And so, I'm not hating on the Iranians for being little bitches about the words. The words are important. Because you know what? The second that you stop being serious about the words, some other bitch is going to get serious about the words. And then you'll wish you were serious about the words. Because now they're finding loopholes in your words. And you were like, God damn it. God fucking damn it. I tried to be relaxed for once in my life about the words. And look how it's come back to bite me in the ass. Which you may have heard when people talk about final status things. A lot of the problem is you want there to be big parts of land that are connected so you can actually have some sort of a state. But that said, it was important to the Palestinians to get some redeployments happening before final status talk. They didn't want to be put in a position where they were fighting for territories that they should have already been given by virtue of agreements that had already been signed because they hadn't been redeployed yet. So that withdrawal eventually does take place even though they're unhappy with the areas selected on January 4th. On January 17, Barak and Arafat have dinner together. I really need to learn, obviously I hadn't finished editing this, but what I wanted, now I remember why I didn't finish editing it. I wanted to learn how to do a graphic so that I had the timeline going across the bottom of the screen. So you saw when the deadlines were, and you saw these dates, and you saw us moving with no progress. So what I wanted to create for this video was a bar along the bottom where, when you watch things on the History Channel and stuff, and it like zooms out and it zooms in, and you see because I say a lot of dates in this, and I just want to be able to show now we're at this day, now we're at this day, now we're at this day, and look, nothing's happened, and we were supposed to have had all of this happen by this day. We're getting closer and closer to these final status agreements where all of this stuff's meant to have been agreed upon, but we've agreed on nothing. Zoom in, zoom out. And this is my dream. This was my dream to create this graphic. But once again, we have a grasp reach problem. Yeah, exactly, Liddy. Within the law, that's basically, in my mind, as a non-lawyer, but as someone who apparently is only friends with lawyers, in my mind, the law is literally just people arguing over the meaning of words. Especially things like constitutional law. It's what was meant by this? Friends, Arafat explained to Barak that he has to show his people genuine gains. He asked him, please, include the Palestinian areas near Jerusalem in the next deployment. And apparently, as he was leaving, Barak said to Arafat that he didn't see the point in even doing the next redeployment, that they should just leave it to the final negotiation. Even though he says this, there is a meeting on February 3rd to discuss the third and final redeployment, which is outlined in Sharm el-Sheikh. It was scheduled to take place on January 20th, but obviously it hasn't. Did you just see Arafat frame mog everyone there? I'll just take it back just a second so you can see this wide stance army fit with the kiffa he's just frame mogging. 6.1%, but it did not include Abu Dis. I went forward, not back. Even with I fucked up. Areas, which you may have heard when people talk about final status things, a lot of the problem is you want there to be big parts of land that are connected. He asked him, please, include the Palestinian areas near Jerusalem in the next deployment. And apparently, as he was leaving, Barak said to Arafat that he didn't see the point in even doing the next redeployment, that they should just leave it to the final negotiation. Even though he says this, there is a meeting on February 3rd to discuss the third and final redeployment, which is outlined in Sharm el-Sheikh. You fuckers all showed up in suits? Nah, bro. That's not where it's at. Ehud Barak looks like one of the masses there. You can immediately identify Arafat. It was scheduled to take place on January 20th, but obviously it hasn't taken place, so it's postponed. And at the stage of this negotiation, the Palestinian Authority has autonomous control, so complete control over 11.1% of the West Bank and civil control over 28.9%. This final redeployment was for 6.1%, but it did not include Abu Dis, the discussed neighborhood in East Jerusalem that was agreed upon and very important to Arafat and the Palestinians. And therefore, once again, Arafat rejects the map. He said, this was agreed upon, this is important to us, this is important to our people, we can't accept this, you have to give us one of the neighborhoods near Jerusalem. And that's it for negotiation. Complete breakdown. February 13, the deadline for the framework arrives, and no framework. No negotiations are taking place anymore, and fighting breaks out in the occupied Palestinian territories because there is rising tension over no fucking shit. Okay, so diplomacy doesn't work. That's the message that the people are getting. The fact that there's no progress, but nothing spills over into Israel. The leaders meet again on March 7, but to be honest, it only makes things worse. And so Mubarak from Egypt intervenes and convinces both sides to resume final negotiation. Mubarak, the Pakistan of his time, and suggests have the framework by the end of May, and you can still have the final agreement by September. On March 15, the Israeli cabinet approves the transfer of a small Palestinian village, Anada, from Zone B to Zone A in order to try and quell some of that tension that's mounting in the occupied Palestinian territories because no planned withdrawals from the West Bank have occurred. But Ariel Sharon, leader of the opposition, and the media are completely against this move. The media starts running stories.
You see the houses very, very close on the road of Betunia. Betunia is supposed to this week go over to A area under full Palestinian Authority, which means that we're going to have the guns of Arafat right here in these houses, right on the main road, very, very close to the main road.
So I think
But
I cut it
also,
out accidentally there, but Ariel Sharon was basically going on
it's like,
TV saying, you,
yes, but
what he is
also
doing
inflation.
is giving
Like,
terrorists villages above Jewish villages so they can literally shoot down from the windows into the Jewish villages and kill Israelis. He's giving them a geographic advantage so that they can slaughter Israelis, and that's how Ariel Sharon was pushing it.
Road going down to Modi'in and Tel Aviv.
Good. The peace process. They invite Iran and Rabo to Washington to have a discussion, and the two. So this is Clinton intervening. So you have to understand as well, Oslo for Clinton is a very big deal. It's kind of his thing. He almost brought peace to the Middle East. So for him, it's very important that this gets back on track before the end of his presidency, because he would like it to work out so that he can say, I did that. So he's inviting them back to Washington to discuss. Who come and they brainstorm without making any commitments. And this is not Barack or Arafat. These are their negotiators. Come up with some really interesting ideas, but obviously it leads nowhere because they're brainstorming without commitments. And the Palestinian situation is getting more and more tense. And after violence breaks out on March 22nd between militants and the Palestinian police, Ross and Ayalon start to fear that there is going to... So this is a problem as well, right? A huge part of the Palestinian agreements under the Oslo framework was to stop militants. So a lot of these clashes, they're not even happening between Israelis and Palestinians. They're happening, the police they're like, every time a militant group does something, they're like, you're undermining our position. So the police are having to crack down on their own people, which of course is creating even more of a credibility gap between the leadership, Fatah and Arafat, and the Palestinian people. And this is the problem as well, when it's like, whenever Netanyahu is very famous, well, we had no partner for peace, you were creating when Arafat bends to every single request you have, he ultimately will lose the consent of his population. So he then can't, any person you could get to do every single thing you wanted without concession, without any sign of good faith whatsoever, will not have the consent of the people. You can't give nothing and expect someone to just do everything you ask of them and still have the sign of the people. Be a serious outbreak of violence either against the Palestinian Authority or against Israel, unless something is done in relation to the peace process soon. But, of course, Barack is back on the Syria track. He's got to... Whenever you think things are getting too serious, to be fair, Ehud Barak, he's just like me, for real. If a job is stressing you out, just focus on a different job. That's the key to not being stressed anymore. As long as you're still productive, maybe not on task number one, maybe not on the important thing, maybe not on the thing that's urgent and has a deadline and is overwhelming you. Don't focus on that. Focus on the non-urgent task. But you'll still feel good because you're still kind of doing something. Do that instead. That'll make you feel better. He's just like me. I can't even judge him for that because it's how I operate. I can't even be mad. New idea. He's come up with a plan that involved giving Syrians more than the Golan Heights, but they wouldn't have access to Lake Tiberias. So the settlements around the lake would stay as part of... See, I need to put a map in here. See, this is why I wasn't done editing, because I wanted my fancy fucking timeline to put in the quotes and I needed a map here. Israel, and concessions would be given elsewhere. He was so excited by his plan, Barack says, Clinton, host a summit. Invite Assad. It's happening. I've got a plan. So an appointment is made for March 26th in Geneva. Assad agreed to come, but he hasn't been visited since the last failed summit, right? So we don't know where he's at. So Madeleine Albright, Secretary of State, offers to go to Syria ahead of the summit to prepare, test the temperature with Assad, see where he's at. But Barack vetoes this. He's like, you're not allowed to go. Because if you go to Syria to talk with Assad before the negotiation, he will think that there's room to move, that he can push back. But this is a final offer. According to Orisa Guy, who is nothing... Isn't that great? Don't we love this? Don't we love this isn't negotiation, this is a final offer? Don't we see that working well today and throughout all of history? When fucking Vance was like, we made an offer, they rejected it. It's like, okay, and that's not how negotiation works. Also, the last time you talked to this guy, you freaked out, had a tantrum breakdown on the tarmac and left. So maybe it would be good for someone to go and convince him to show up, because last time you fucking freaked out. What the fuck am I? Oh, you're writing poetry now. Because yeah, I got it. Syria guy. Assad arrived in Geneva extremely willing to reach peace. He brought with him hundreds of experts to help draw up a peace process, but talks fell apart really quick. Clinton sat down and he was reading out Barack's offer out loud, but he was stopped by Assad when he got to the section about the boundary line. Assad wanted to clarify, hang on. Is this the 1967 line? And Clinton was like, let me finish. But in this offer, Israel's gonna... There we go. There's a map. Told you I needed a map. There it is. Everyone take a look at the map. What you're looking at, let me get my little handy dandy mouse for you. Here, this is Lake Tiberias. This is the important thing, right? This is the important thing. This dark line, this dark grey line, that is the 1967 line. Okay? That's the 1967 line. Let's just keep that in mind. Oh, wait, okay. The 3 lines in this map were presented in this manner to President Assad in March 2000 to show the contrast between the 1923 international boundary, one expert's interpretation of the June 4, 1967 line, and the Israeli proposal of the June 4, 1967 line. Okay, so June 4, this dark line is the one that Israel wants. But I believe Syria wants all of the area along the lake, which to me makes sense. I don't think Israel gets this little bit on this side of the lake. You know what I mean? To me, not even thinking politically, right? Hey Bryce, not even thinking politically, just thinking in terms of like neatness. Just in terms of neatness, I'm gonna say Syria gets the whole side of that lake. Yeah, it's almost 1967. It's actually more than 1967, but Israel will keep that land around Lake Tiberias. Assad is immediately like, meeting over, stop it, I don't want to talk, this is pointless, the Israelis don't want peace. Clinton says to Assad, come on, Assad, try and see things from Barack's point of view. He's got this weak coalition, he won't be able to sell peace to the public, but he will be if he's able to retain sovereignty over the lake. Assad replies, Barack's domestic concerns are his and his alone. I don't know why you're telling... Fucking fair enough. That's right, boss up. Be a bitch, say it how it is. What do you mean? See, you know what fucking annoys me? When you're having an issue with a friend or something, or like, and you have that middle friend, and they're like, I wish you could see it from her perspective. It's like, no, why is it my job to see it from her perspective? Is she seeing it from my perspective? That sounds like a her problem. That sounds like a problem for her. I don't know why her problem has to be my problem. Why do I have to fix my problem and her problem? I feel like she should maybe fix her problem. I feel like Barack's weak coalition is Barack's problem and not mine. My problem is you're occupying my fucking land and you want peace. So I'm here to make peace. Very gracious of me, very kind, very demure. I'm here, brought all these people. I'm fully on board. I'm fully on board to make peace. My problem that I need sorted in the peace is the fact you're occupying my land. And now you want me to give you my land? Because you have mommy issues? No. Bryce, I have something to tell you, but it's private. But I must tell you, I think you'll find it very funny. It's like Assad. Hafez Assad is like, hey, you fucked me over last time, but I'm back again and I'm taking this peace deal extremely seriously. And then you're like, yeah, but he's got a really weak coalition, so you have to give him a really good deal. Otherwise, he won't be able to make peace with you. I think we've forgotten who needs the peace more. I think we've forgotten who the peace agreement is in benefit of. Let's just reflect for a minute. Anyway, one could get pissed off if one thought about it too often. Luckily, one makes a video and then one abandons the video and forgets about it for years. Telling me about it. Clinton is like, let me just finish the document. Assad is like, ah, la, 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 la. Like, literally he refuses to listen. Clinton is trying to read the document and Assad is interrupting him by saying, Barack does not want peace. Barack does not want peace. He's repeating it over and over and over. That means, this was also my dad's strategy when he got mad. He would be like, pick your clothes up off the stairs, pick your clothes up off the stairs, pick your clothes up off the stairs, pick your clothes up off the stairs. You couldn't say anything. Pick your clothes up. Sometimes he'd get so angry he'd lose words. He'd be like, rah, rah, rah. So I can very clearly see Hafez Assad in this moment. Barack does not want peace. Barack does not want peace. I can hear it. Ends, and instead Madeleine Albright and Dennis Ross read the proposal to Al-Shara. He then suggests that the two sides should publish a joint communique about the conference to show we're making, progress, but Barack refuses. The negotiations come to an end, and so does the Israel-Syria peace process. Throughout this period of focus on Syria, again, the Israeli team consistently turned down invitations to convene and negotiate with the Palestinians. So we have now had months of no talking, despite the fact that the idea was we were now going to reach a framework agreement in May. The United States comes in again and says, look, we support the timetable outlined in Sharm el-Sheikh, and we're hoping that an agreement for permanent status can still be reached by the agreed upon date. The Palestinians had no choice but to hope that something would happen by September 13th of 2000. However, the more that things were stagnant in terms of the situation on the ground, the more they were getting tense. By the beginning of May, the situation that had already escalated progressively worse. According to Sharm el-Sheikh, framework should have been concluded by now. The most sensitive issues for permanent status should be being discussed. That should be underway. They should have been identified in the framework. Now they should be. So don't you think if there was a little thing along the bottom that had a timeline so you knew where we were up to and you knew how many months had gone by where there'd been no discussion, that would be really helpful and a cool graphic? I agree. Being discussed, there should have been redeployments happening, but nothing has. And now that I see it and I know that's, I remember it's like, oh, you wanted that timeline effect. I'm like, no wonder I didn't publish it, because I saw how great it could be with the timeline effect. And without the timeline effect, it's not what it ought to be. Occurred when Israel celebrates their Independence Day. There are clashes that last 3 days, and they're the worst to occur since Barack has been leader. Talks resume on the 4th of May, but they don't go well. They discuss borders, and they agree on a formula that considers they're both being flower mogged, if you're wondering. I check every frame now, and they are both being flower mogged. It is 1967, demographics and security. But when word of this formula reaches Barack, he completely vetoes it. Absolutely not. 1967 is out of the question. Barack got his negotiators to present a map where the West Bank was divided into three. 66% of the West Bank was to be given immediately to the Palestinians. 20% was to be permanently annexed by Israel, and 14% would remain under Israeli control indefinitely. Obviously, the Palestinians did not like this, and they presented their own alternative map, where 4% would be left under Israeli control, and that would be offset by a territory exchange. Odin realizes these negotiations are going terribly, and a large Ariel Sharon wasn't the leader, Ehud Barak was, but Ariel Sharon was the one who was, this is right before he fucks everything up with the second intifada and goes to so it makes sense that he would be on the news, because he was the one actively being like, the peace, he's the head of Likud at this time, and by the end of this, toward the end of the actual Camp David negotiations, he will go to Al-Aqsa Mosque and start the second intifada. Which part of that's, obviously he didn't, that's, it's like saying that Franz Ferdinand started the war. It's kind of like, tongue-in-cheek. Obviously, he lit the match. The reason they're going terribly is because there is absolutely no trust between these two sides. And, isn't that crazy how you need trust in order to have meaningful negotiation? That's so crazy. Almost like a lesson we could have learnt. Almost like a lesson we should have learned. Almost like a lesson that would be useful today. We all have to have a libertarian arc. I would like to remind everyone that as a pluralist, there are still parts of me that are libertarian. And the part of me that is libertarian is that I am a Waco truther, and that was government violence against citizens, and it was government overreach, and I could talk all night about Waco. We don't need to, but I want to remind you that whenever you think I'm fully sane and a totally trustworthy person, there are facts you don't remember. This is one of them. And he suggests that there should be a goodwill act done. Like, maybe we should release some prisoners, because if we can just get a little bit of trust, everything will go a lot smoother. But Barack denies this request. Sometime in April, Gilead Shia is incorporated back into the peace process, and he is organizing a secret. I've only shown you a little bit of his face, just a touch of his face as a I stand the killdozer, you know it. You know it. I judge it. That little gasp I just did, rough, that was for you. I'm sorry. But I do stand the killdozer. It's another, you know how before I was like, I understand why Ehud Barak focused on Syria for a bit, because I behave exactly the same. Killdozer is what I wish I was brave enough. That's how I ought to behave, you know? Anyway, clearly this graphic was meant to be further in, but I'm choosing to say that this was an artistic choice to reflect some sort of feeling I have about Gilead Shia. That was originally industry focused, but then got hijacked by them. Oh my god. If only someone had given the soldiers at Waco a Pepsi. I know! Or a Snickers, because you're not yourself when you're hungry. Crit. Track 2 negotiation, which runs in parallel to the official talk. So kind of like how Oslo happened, this is the Stockholm channel. So the first meeting of the Stockholm channel, I talked to someone about this, and they were like, wait, I don't understand. Have they just given up on the first, like, this is what I mean when I say people don't understand diplomacy, right? In terms of, like, people, like, look at what's happening in Iran when they didn't reach a deal on day one. They were like, so talks have failed. I'm like, okay, so you don't understand how long talks take. And then it's like with track 2 diplomacy, it's like, what do you mean they're talking in Stockholm? That's going to undermine the first talks. And it's like, no. It's called track 2 diplomacy. Sometimes we got to start, you know, sometimes you have a Word document and you're working on something and you're like, I need a new Word document. I need a new Word document. I need a different Word document that's focusing on something different. Maybe a document that no one will ever see. This is my document that people will see. This is my document that people will never see. Sometimes you need Untitled Document 2. Sometimes you need Track 2 diplomacy. The secret Stockholm channel takes place on May 5, and it's focused on the future of the settlements. The Israeli team is Gilead Shia and Shlomo Ben Ami, and the Palestinian team is Hassan Asfer and Abu Allah. They are joined by Americans Robert Malley and Dennis Ross, and Robert Malley, Dennis Ross, and Shlomo Ben Ami have all written books about this. And I know that because I read all of the books to write this. But there's a lot of first-hand accounts from the negotiators. So Clinton obviously wrote on this. Shlomo Ben Ami, I really like Shlomo Ben Ami's book. There's a book called Shattered Dreams, which is really good. And Dennis Ross and Malley also wrote books. Abu Allah says, look, this is the Palestinian position on refugees and Jerusalem. Any settlements should be based on Resolution 194, so settlement of the refugee issue, and there should be a committee created, and it should include Israel and Palestine and the United States and Canada and Europe and Japan and any other countries in the world that have or would take refugees from Palestine. Then we would prepare a questionnaire, which we would give out to all the refugees, but we would agree that the questions would be phrased in a way that would ensure only a very small minority of Palestinian refugees would say that they wished to return. Okay, so this is like a really good point as well, where we get an actual example from the peace process. Like a lot of the time people are like, how would we ever solve the right of return? Like how like that's just an issue, like it's unfair to even request it because it's not a reasonable request. Literally, this is how you fix it, right? You send diplomats to discuss it and they come up with a solution because that is their job. So the job is, okay, so we're going to say We're basing everything on the right of return. We're going to acknowledge the right of return. Then we're going to create a coalition of all of the countries that have Palestinian refugees and would accept Palestinian refugees. Then we're going to send out a survey to every refugee saying, would you like to return? But we are going to word it in a way that ensures that only a few people return. Once again, the importance of words. It's like, well, how can you guarantee? You just can. People know how to fucking word things. Don't now suddenly become stupid about politics. You know how politics works. You know how these things work. Yes, you can word things in certain ways to ensure that you get the kind of results you want to get. Okay? This is exactly my issue. And people are like, you'll never be able to solve that. It's like, okay, yeah, not if you never ever have a fucking talk. That's a great, if you never sit down and try and solve it, yes, you'll never try and solve it. It's my thing that annoys me when people are like, I'm for a 2-state solution, I'm for a 1-state solution. It's like, okay, bro, we don't have the working. You're not for a solution because you don't have a solution without the work. We need to work. Okay, so before you start talking about what the end product looks like, let's do some of the work in between that. The most intense period of negotiation in Barak's entire prime ministerial term begins in Sweden on May 10th. The Israelis present a map of how they see the West Bank looking after the treaty. Palestinians would be given 76.6% of the territory, with 13.3% becoming part of Israel and another 10.1% being retained as part of a security area. The Palestinians, there's always a fucking security area with these bitches. We're upset. Oh, we just want the edge of the lake. We just want this little buffer zone. The buffer zone pisses me off now because it's like, as I have said before, the same thing with Lebanon, right? This pisses me off. This isn't Ben Gurion's time. We don't have tanks. What is your buffer zone? Why do I look so feral in this fucking video? Because they had said before and they restated, we are unable to even consider more than 13% being annexed. Not even thinking about the 10%, we can't have more than 13% annexed. While these talks are happening, unrest breaks out in the occupied Palestinian territories and the Palestinian prisoners in the Israeli jails start a hunger strike. On May 14th, Yasser Abed Rabo finds out about these secrets. I think he also wrote a book. Stockholm Channel, and he resigns as the head of the official delegation in protest, because how dare you. The following day, May 15th, sometimes if Untitled Document 1 finds out about Untitled Document 2, it decides to quit without saving. You know? Was the observation of Nakba, which led to demonstrations, which led to violence. 4 Palestinians were killed, 200 were injured, and 8 IDF soldiers were also injured. In these clashes, the gunmen of Al-Tanzim, a Palestinian militia, take part. This is the first time they've taken part, and Israel sees this as a wake-up call. A strong militia is now turning its guns on the IDF, and Barak was furious with Arafat. He called him and he said, you have to stop these demonstrations. You have to restore peace. This is unacceptable. And of course I can understand why Barak was frustrated, because he had just, after a lot of back and forth, agreed to include Palestinian suburbs in Jerusalem in the redeployment. He had literally held a vote that morning, and it had cost him a lot. The vote, which was meant to show goodwill to the Palestinians. But this also shows the problem of leaving things too long, right? Like, okay, you finally did something, which is really good, but it's too late. It's too little too late. I understand why you're upset. It's too little too late. Was opposed by the Shahs, opposed by the Russian Party, opposed by the National Religious Party. David Levy and the National Religious Party quit the coalition, and there was a vote of no confidence call. And Barak agreed to Israeli protests against the redeployment break out in front of the Knesset. So things were super intense for Barak. Postpone the transfer to try and save himself. Talks So Barak postponed the transfer to save himself because everyone was quitting his coalition. But he's also pissed because he only had to do that because literally these gunmen started to fuck around the day he finally gets the deal through. But why didn't he get the deal through earlier? It's not like he was trying this whole time to get the, whole deal through. Zoom in Sweden on May 19th, and an agreement is written up, the framework agreement on permanent status. The Palestinians say, look, we are still willing to conclude talks by September 13, but there are still a lot of things to discuss. Within hours, the tone completely changes. The secret negotiations have been leaked to the Palestinian press, and the Palestinian Authority is being harshly criticised by the opposition. Unrest breaks out in the occupied territories again on May 20 in response to this, and it happens in an even bigger way. And Barak calls Arafat and he says, if you don't restore peace today, you can say goodbye to those Palestinian suburbs. Sounds like someone on Truth Social almost. Someone who'd do well putting posts on Truth Social. Fix it today or you can say goodbye to negotiations. Near Jerusalem. And me when I do all my chores at the last second and the apartment still looks like shit. I have no partner for peace. And Sandy Berger is visiting from the United States at the time, and he also is talking to Arafat. He's saying, you have to stop the violence. But Arafat tells Berger, he's like, I am doing as much as I can. But the truth of the matter is the Palestinian people have run out of patience waiting for absolutely any progress. There is nothing I can do. They're rightfully angry, and what I need to stop the violence is progress, and I can't do that by myself. The next day, in response to the flare-up, Israel announces that it no longer has any intention of carrying out the third redeployment phase as outlined in Sharm el-Sheikh. Barak said that the scope and character of all redeployments were at the discretion of the government of Israel, and therefore they had the right to defer the third phase of redeployment if they wanted to. This was not the consensus view in Israel, and obviously it wasn't the view of the Palestinians. And when it came to international actors, the United States, Jordan and Egypt all agreed that if you're not having meaningful talks in regard to permanent status, which they weren't, then Israel should at least be honouring its existing commitments to. Fair enough, right? Because at the beginning, Ehud Barak said, hey, I don't want to do any of the agreements, we'll just put it into the final settlement, and if we're not making progress within 6 months, we'll go back to the interim agreements. So yes, very good observation by the United States. If you're not making any progress on those final status, then maybe you should honor the interim agreements, correct, to redeploy. But they didn't. Which unfortunately means that May 21st, Barak decides to not go to Washington, which he was meant to do as part of the peace process. And he decides instead, you know what? Let's withdraw from Lebanon. One can only... We fucked Syria. Syria's what else can distract us? Me literally trying to find anything to do except the thing I have to do. This is me. I can't judge him. Because this is even me today. Why do you think I got my nails done? Why do you think these are done? Because I had something else to do. I had to do the video on Palantir, so instead I got my nails done. Because obviously I can't film a video with bare nails. That's another reason this one can't be released. Why was this video not released? It's good because I had in my head a timeline feature that would exist at the bottom of the video where you could see the time elapsing and how nothing's happening over time. Time is moving. We're getting closer to the deadline. Nothing's happening. And clearly in my mind, I built up how good this timeline would exist. And when I wasn't able to, I think I played around in, After Effects for like maybe 2 days, and when I wasn't a master of it, I simply put the video in storage where it died a slow death, and then Wallach revived it like Jesus, and now we're watching it. Evan, every video I've posted, someone comments on my nails, so now I kind of like. Now I could never, you know? I don't know if Claude Ali, I'm not going to ask you to research this because you research so much AI shit and then I never reply to you, but I don't mean to not reply to you. I just get overwhelmed. I need AI for the AI. But, I don't know if it can do something like an effect for a video, to put in a video. You know what I mean? assume that, like Syria, Barack thought that maybe I will end that conflict, that'll give me a win at home, and that'll also give me another, Arab state on Israel's side. It'll give me more leverage. But obviously, the Palestinian, because that works so well when you try that with Syria. Syria, who is less aligned. Negotiators freak out. They rush to the Israeli team and they beg them. They say, please do not let Barak go forward with this withdrawal. Because what it will signal to the Palestinian people, who are already riled up, by the way, it will say, okay, Hezbollah is fighting and killing Israelis to get the IDF to move back behind the 1967 line. Wait, the Palestinian Authority has out. They rush to the Israeli team and they beg them. They say, please. Decides to not go to Washington, which he was meant to do as part of the peace process. And he decides instead, you know what? Let's withdraw from Lebanon. Makes sense. One can only assume that, like Syria, Barak thought that maybe I will end that conflict, that'll give me a win at home, and that'll also give me another, Arab state on Israel's side. It'll give me more leverage. But obviously, the Palestinian negotiators freak out. They rush to the Israeli team and they beg them. They say, please do not let Barak go forward with this withdrawal. Because what it will signal to the Palestinian people, who are already riled up, by the way, it will say, okay, Hezbollah is fighting and killing Israelis to get the IDF to move back behind the 1967 line. The Palestinian Authority has been killing their own people in order to help the diplomatic route, and that has resulted in nothing. So if you withdraw from Lebanon, the message the Palestinians will receive is fight and kill Israelis and you will get land. And while this... You see the point? It's like, why would you withdraw? Why would you do what a Hezbollah wants in response to violence? And not do what Palestine wants in response to diplomacy? Because the obvious outcome then is that the Palestinians are going to get more violent. Like, you see that, right? You are literally sending the message that violence gets results. Please don't do that. Please. Please, 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 please. At the end of the day, well, Ehud is maybe just a girl. The problem is overwhelming. So he creates other problems and makes the first problem worse. Okay, I can't go into detail, but I want you guys to know I had what can only be described as a complete mental... Who the fuck knows what happened on the weekend? Pixel heard the whole thing. And she watched me at every turn do whatever was required to make my own situation worse. In my own personal game of Civ, Evan, I did. And you know what's so funny? I destroyed my own country. And I took others down with me. And then once everything was destroyed, I was like, that was so stupid. How do I undo this? How do I undo that? How do I, but you know what? You can't. I just Ehud Baraked my way through the weekend. And so I can't judge him. Because I am him. And you know what I have to tell you? Pix was there for me at the whole time. But sometimes I would say she was an accomplice. She was not... She was kind of... She was the United States. Okay? She wants you to think that she was there brokering peace, creating a stable situation. But she was definitely emboldening me a little. I just want to say that. Ultimately, yes, probably a force for good in the scheme of things when you think about who else could have been taking the place, right? But maybe emboldening me slightly too much. This was communicated to Barak. He was like, no, I don't think that'll happen. Let's withdraw from Lebanon. Me. Hey, you know the obvious outcome of this action that you're about to take is this. Nah, it'll be fine. I actually think I'm right. Within days, the IDF and the SLA had withdrawn from their positions, but then things collapsed very quickly. Without the IDF, the SLA fall apart. Some join Hezbollah, others flee to Israel, and it looks like they're fleeing. So from the outside, it looks like Hezbollah has won. This doesn't send a great message to the Palestinian people.
Exactly
On June
as
10,
expected.
Hafez Assad dies and is succeeded by his son Bashar. And this means that negotiations with Syria back to square one, and Israel really has no choice but to prioritize Palestine. It's almost like sometimes the son is more radical than the father. It's almost like sometimes the opportunity for peace dies with the father. Please, Matthew. It's Ayatollah Joanna Barak Trump. Put some respect on my name. Or, even more appropriate, just refer to me as Supreme Leader Partner. We're now at June 12th. In talks with the Americans, the Palestinian leadership make it clear that they don't really want to go to a summit.
Thank you.
Arafat says, look, I'm worried. I'm worried that you guys are going to work together. You're going to present a take it or leave it deal, like you do with Syria, and provide no real space for compromise. And then when we say no, you're going to blame Palestine for a lack of progress, even if Barak presents us with a deal that would not result. So from the outside, it looks like Hezbollah has won. This doesn't send a great... I just want you guys to know, I want you to hear what Arafat is predicting here and think about how people see the Camp David talks. Great message to the Palestinian people. On June 10, Hafez Assad dies and is succeeded by his son Bashar. And this means that negotiations with Syria back to square one, and Israel really has no choice but to prioritize Palestine. We're now at June 12th. In talks with the Americans, the Palestinians... Just quickly, June 12th, we're getting very close to the final deal. Okay, you don't have my timeline to show you, but we're getting very close. Indian leadership make it clear that they don't really want to go to a summit. Arafat says, look, I'm worried. I'm worried that you guys are going to work together. You're going to present a take it or leave it deal, like you do with Syria, and provide no real space for compromise. And then when we say no, you're going to blame Palestine for a lack of progress, even if Barak presents us with a deal that would not result in any tenable peace. The Americans did try to stress to the Israelis, your constant postponement of redeployment is completely undermining the trust between you two and your credibility. But also, if you want to have a summit, it cannot be any later than July 31st. President's window of opportunity will realistically close because Clinton is leaving office. Okay, so there is literally, the US is saying, you cannot, we are brokering this, you cannot push it out any further than this date. Also, you need to start playing ball a bit because there's no trust. Arafat is saying, I don't want to come to the negotiation because I saw what you did with Syria and I think you're going to do it here. You are going to create a situation where you say to me, hey, this is the deal, take it or leave it. And when I am put in a position where I have to say I leave it because even if I accept it, it won't be implementable. Because no one will agree to this. I can't accept this. This isn't a real deal. If I accept this deal, no one will agree to it on the Palestinian side. I can only accept what my people will accept. This is unacceptable. You're going to present me that kind of deal. I'm going to say no because it's not a serious offer. It's not a deal that anyone could ever accept. And even if I did accept it, it wouldn't hold. So when I say no, you're going to turn around and say, it's my fault that Palestine didn't play ball, despite months and months of this man not negotiating, not upholding any agreement that he formally signed, actively fucking us over every step of the way. You're going to make it so this summit happens, we come, we say no, and then you blame us. I don't want to do that. That's what Arafat said about Camp David. Just two things have to be done. Give Arafat something to get him to put aside the third redeployment and find a way to postpone the Jerusalem question. On June 14, Barak convenes his security cabinet in order to come up with some sort of gesture. He looks at the map for the redeployment and he goes, okay, the land that we're meant to return, let's just reduce it significantly. We'll make it way smaller and we'll release 3 Palestinian prisoners. This measure, which is the last opportunity to establish any sort of trust before Camp David, is offered to the Palestinians, but they take it as an insult. It's significantly less than what they had already. It's a spit in the face, right? Because what I'm about to say, and I know because I said it and I recorded it and I wrote it, this isn't an offer. This was already agreed. This is settled. You don't get to go back and unsettle it and say, aren't we so good for offering you this? This was already done. Now you're taking things, you might as well be saying, we're just going to take a little bit of Palestinian land back, by the way. Some of that area in Section A, we're just going to take a little bit left. And by the way, we're going to give you 3 dead prisoners. Aren't we good? No, you're not offering us anything. This was agreed, and now you're changing the agreement. And you're expecting us to be thankful for you taking away our gains. Agreed to. So as I'm sure you can tell, no one is feeling particularly great about this summit. On June 29, Barak talks to his ministers about what they're going to do if the summit fails and the Palestinians declare a state unilaterally. And they come up with variants of this field of thorns doctrine where they would combat expected violence and take back some land. But then news that the Israelis were considering taking back autonomous territory. You got to always be careful when you make plans. Never say anything you wouldn't say to a crowded room. You gotta be very careful. It leaks to the press. So then Palestinian organizations start thinking about how they're going to take on the Israeli army if the peace process fails. So they start training combatants, including youth. And that training gets broadcast in the Israeli media everywhere. And they start saying, well, the Palestinians, this is such a good thing to happen a week before the final summit. I'm so glad that plans about stopping a war and stealing Palestinian territory leaked to the Palestinians, who then started to train to fight them. I'm so glad that everyone started preparing for a war the week before. I think it's really good. Preparing for their war of independence. Violence does break out for a minute on July 1st in Palestine, in Ramallah, but it is shut down. Peace is restored. On July 5, Clinton officially invites Arafat to attend the Camp David summit. The Palestinians don't want to go to the summit. Nothing has been prepared for the summit. There is no adequate preparation that would allow for a permanent status agreement. However, Arafat really likes Clinton and he doesn't want to say, hang on, I'm wearing a weird belt. So if you're wondering what I'm doing with my hands, I'm trying to fix this weird fucking belt. I know to Clinton, and Clinton has promised him and promises him again that I'm not going to blame either side. In the event of a failure to reach an agreement, there will be no blame. So he feels this promise is like a quasi-insurance policy, and he says, okay, we'll come. On Israel's side, Barak's coalition is falling apart. The Russian language party, Israel Aliyah, wants a national unity party to be formed for the negotiations. Sorry, you couldn't hear over the screaming of the Russian language party. The Russian language party wants a national unity party formed specifically. So a new party of all the parties to be formed for the negotiations. The National Religious Party agrees. When the summit is announced and there isn't a unity party, both of those parties leave the coalition. The Shahs then demand that Barak shares his non-negotiables with the government before the summit, but Barak refused. So the Russian language party and the Shah party, or are these the Shahs? The Russian language and one other party want a unity party. When that gets denied, they leave the coalition. Okay, so we're down 2 parties in the coalition. Now the Shahs are saying, you need to share with us your non-negotiables before you go. I'm fairly sure he's going to say no, and the Shahs are also going to leave. This is to do so, and 2 days later, the Shahs quit the coalition. Okay, so we're down 3 parties. David, Barak's coalition is down to 42 members. July 9, Shlomo Ben Ami breaks the news that, hang on, I think it's how many, hang on, because we did the maths just before on how many it took. Looking at Israeli elections is actually fucking insane. The coalitions they come up with to get into power is crazy. So there are 120 members. So his coalition has 42 members now. How many people to form government? Sorry guys, this is important though. You're meant to have 61 seats out of 120. That's what I thought. So he doesn't have the requisite number, but maybe no one else can form government yet. He's down to 41 members. There are 120 members in the Knesset. Look, if we do reach an accord, that is going to be put to a referendum in Israel. Eric Hatz says, well, if that's the case, I understand. Wait, can I just say, let's put it to a referendum. That's got it. That Australia has learnt this lesson. Oh, this thing that everybody wants that's great for human rights and everybody thinks that's awesome and we could just do it if we wanted to. Why don't we do a postal vote? Why don't we do a referendum? I would like to have absolutely no responsibility for this, so let's make it a decision of the people. National Religious Party agrees. When the summit is announced and there isn't a unity party, both of those parties leave the coalition. The Shahs then demand that Barack shares his non-negotiables with the government before the summit. Barack. Can you imagine being Bill Clinton and you're just like, I had to take a break from cheating on my wife to beg the Palestinians to be there, and you're basically not even coming, in effect? You know that Hillary Clinton didn't speak to Bill Clinton after the Monica Lewinsky thing, and she broke her no contact with him to tell him to bomb Yugoslavia. It's one of my favorite Clinton facts. Imagine being like, I can't believe you cheated on me, I'm never going to talk to you again. And then you're like, Bill, if you really love me, you'll bomb Yugoslavia. Crazy fucking law. Fuck the Hillary Clintons. The Clintons. Refuses to do so, and 2 days later the Shahs quit the coalition. And so going into Camp David, Barack's coalition is down to 42 members. July 9, Shlomo Ben Ami breaks the news that, look, if we do reach an accord, that is going to be put to a referendum in Israel. Erekat says, well, if that's the case, I understand you're going to put it to a referendum. We want multiple summits. We don't want everything to be concluded this week. If we try and conclude everything in a week, we know what's going to happen. You're going to create a marketplace of issues where, in order to get some advancement on Jerusalem, we have to give on refugees, when really we should be coming to a middle ground on every single issue. We're not arguing. Isn't that beautiful? That's how diplomacy should go. Each single issue, we're going to find a compromise that works for us. We know what you're going to try and do. You're going to try and play all of the issues off. We'll give you Jerusalem if you give us no right of return. Very smart Palestinians. Over a car, this is a peace agreement. Let's just have multiple summits. But Barack was very clear with his head negotiator how he wanted to approach the talks with the Palestinians. The message to Arafat should be that this is a historic opportunity that will not be repeated. The Palestinians must consent in principle to our... Not in the ACT, Wallach. We voted yes. Jointly drafting a negotiated document, collating all our agreements and disagreements in advent of a permanent settlement. Should they not consent, it will be proof that they have been conducting a ritual conducive to confrontation rather than true negotiations. Ridiculous. On July 10, the opposition passes a motion of censure in the Knesset. In fact, on this day, Barack faces 2 votes of no confidence. A motion of no confidence. July 10, so you keep the dates in your mind. Barack has 2 votes of no confidence, July 10. Confidence was passed, but it was only by a simple majority. You have to have 61 votes to force an election, and that isn't reached. However, David Levy, the foreign minister, says, you know what, I'm not going to the summit. As a result, he is replaced by Shlomo Ben Ami as the Minister for Foreign Affairs and Internal Security. Before flying out to Camp David, Barack re-emphasizes his 4 no's. Israel will not return to the 67 borders. Jerusalem will not be split. Settlers will not be removed from the West Bank. And Israel will not take responsibility for the refugee problem. Similarly, Arafat reiterated to the Palestinians that their ultimate goal was a state along 1967 borders, with a capital in Jerusalem, and a solution to the refugee problem based on Resolution 194. Isn't that crazy and totally reminiscent of right now? 2 sides going into a negotiation with completely different points of view on all of the key issues that are not reconcilable at all. So a party gets 15% of the vote, it gets 15% of the seats. So it leaves the small niche parties along religious, ethnic and ideological lines, which means minor party, but yeah, exactly. It's also why Netanyahu's been in power. Exactly, and why he's drifted further and further to the right, because he's had to search further and further to get the stronger coalitions. Yeah, I looked at so many when I was doing research for the other videos in the big locker of dead videos on Israel Palestine, and it's just fucking insane. But this is like one of the best examples, because it's like, why did you do a wall-to-wall coalition, bro? What was the idea here? Oh my god, hang on. says, you know what, I'm not going to the summit. As a result, he is replaced by Shlomo Ben-Ami as the Minister for Foreign Affairs and Internal Security. Before flying out to Camp David, Barak re-emphasizes his foreknowns. Israel will not return to the 67 borders. Jerusalem will not be split. Settlers will not be removed from the West Bank, and Israel will not take responsibility for the refugee problem. Similarly, Arafat reiterated to the Palestinians that their ultimate goal was a state along 1967 borders, with a capital in Jerusalem, and a solution to the refugee problem based on Resolution 194. The Palestinian delegation arrived in America, and they set off by car to Camp David. And they have a very incorrect vision about what the summit is going to be. They think, look, we'll conclude with a general agreement, and then that will be followed by some good faith negotiations. In the car, they get very, very, very lost. And they walk around Maryland for 4 hours before turning around and finding some police and saying, can you please take us to Camp David? And this farcical event kind of sets the tone for the rest of the summit. The summit, and that will be the topic of our next video, 11th to 25th of July, the Israel-Palestine Camp David 2000 summit, one of the funniest summits I've ever learnt about. I can't wait to make that video for you because it's going to be very funny. Okay, so that's the end of the video. Because originally I was just going to do one on the Camp David summit, but when I read all of the books from Shlomo Ben-Ami, from Mali, from Dennis Ross, Bill Clinton's book, the Shattered Peace book, the lead up, showing you how little work, how nothing required for a successful convention had gone into. Like, I couldn't not talk about it because the thing is, the summit itself is funny. The video about the summit is funny, right? It's like, I'm telling you, like, okay, for instance, the, everyone had their phones taken off and they'd be locked in, they were like, you're being locked in the room and you're not allowed to leave until you reach an agreement. But people got tired and they broke out the windows. Like, silly shit was happening. It was a very, very strange thing. And like one night they would eat together and they were talking about the football, so everyone thought it was fine. And then Clinton was, you know, Clinton from not Shlomo's, one of the Arab negotiators said that literally one night Clinton came and knocked on the Arab delegation's room and was hanging out with them and they were watching sport together and he was talking about how annoying the Israelis were being. And then obviously, like, he completely fucked them over at the end. But it's like the farcical kind of miscommunications that happened during the summit. If you just watched a video on the summit itself, you'd be like, oh, this is silly. No wonder this negotiation didn't happen. Everyone's being an idiot. But the point is, it was never a serious endeavor to begin with. That's why you need that video that I just showed you, because it never would have worked. Nothing. Of course it was silly. Of course everyone was being stupid because there wasn't any ability to actually reach a situation. Let me see if I have... Just give me 1 second, guys. I have all these documents. Camp David, also Camp David, Camp David 3, Camp David 5. Where's Camp David 4? You'll never know. Oh yeah, also Barak refuses face-to-face meetings with Arafat. Kind of important, kind of the whole point of the reason you're here, right? He goes to his cabin and he won't come out. This is from the diaries of Dennis Ross. It says, he won't have any face-to-face meetings with Arafat. He'll go to his cabin and not come out, and then openly ignore Arafat at dinner. And then at the same time, Arafat was also getting pressure. So the Saudis were calling in. And the Saudis were saying, you can't budge on on Jerusalem at all. I'm just there's a lot of like everyone telling different people different rules as well, like different ideas. Wait. Oh yeah, so the notes I have here are like day by day notes of like what's going on each day. But where is it? There's this funny day. Let me just see if I can find it. I think I made this video in 2024. So I don't remember. Both reject. He also says he won't accept any deal, puts off Jerusalem, won't talk about borders, no progress. The work group on refugees, an agreement which cancels blah, blah, blah. This is an important, an agreement which cancels all claims must be a just solution to hold. Therefore, reparations must be discussed. Reparations must involve items registered by Israeli Department of Abandoned Property, compensation, public property. First tour solely to Israel, UNRWA will, okay, blah, blah, blah. But where's the funny stuff? One of these committees, so there's like different diplomats have been sent into different rooms at Camp David to discuss certain issues. And literally, I can't remember who it is, but one of these committees, they just decide, they said, hey, do you just want to go back to our rooms and sleep? Like, they don't even discuss, because they're like, we're not going to come up with, well, let's go back to our rooms, have a shower, have a nap. Like, they're like, we're not going to, what's the point? Like, we're not going to get anywhere with this. Arafat accepts that 80% of the settlers will remain in the West Bank. So like there are concessions. Things are kind of. Abu Mazen is one of the negotiators, who is Abbas, right? And Albright goes to Abbas to see if he'll undermine Arafat and make a deal, and they'll put him in Arafat's place, but he says no. Barak tells Stephen Cohen, longtime Middle East mediator, that blaming Arafat for the failure stops Israeli society from breaking into left and right camps and also keeps the doves in Israel on side. An Israeli negotiator will comment that an agreement would have been reached if Barak had spent as much time talking to Arafat as he did to his media man. I know I have, there's a certain document where the funny shit is. Where'd I put the funny document? That's what I want to know. That's also Camp David. That's Camp David 2. (2000) Camp David? Probably in the fabled Camp David 4. It's not that one. Because this one I hadn't filmed yet. I had just written the script. But I'm telling you. Yeah, I remember reading, I think it might have been Shattered Dreams. That was my favorite book on the Shattered Dreams. Camp David. Guys, the nails, they're not really typing nails, mind you. Book. Maybe I made it up. Oh, by Charles Enderlin. Yeah. This is it. This was a really good book. The Failure of the Peace Process, 1995 to 2002. But yeah, it's crazy, some of the shit in here. And obviously, if you read all the different, like, you have to read all of the different ones, because even like Robert Malley and Dennis Ross have very different opinions on how these negotiations went. So it's like, it's very cool, it's maybe, but like, there are so many first-hand accounts of what happened at this summit that it's like interesting to see the different perspectives. And then just as I said, the strange story where like, you know, the find window. Let me just check it's not in here. No, window. Find window. I know they broke out a window. Window. Or was it a glass door? No, okay. All I know is they were locked in a room to deal with something like the Jerusalem issue. And they were like, this is the hardest one. Like, we're not going to come up with anything here. Do you want to, we could, if we take the window, they think we're still in the room. We can just have a shower and a nap, and at dinner we can just say we didn't get anywhere. Like, that's crazy. And yet it's what happened, according to the people who did it. So, yeah. Anyway, that's what I had planned for tonight. I made a reel, I made a video, and I made a reel and I published it. And then I made this video and I never published it because I needed a timeline. And then I wrote the script for the video to come after it, which I never made. Sag. And yeah, is there anything I wanted to tell you? People are starving in Somalia. Not good, not good. Not good. No, I think that's all I got in me, guys. I think reacting to myself, I am my number one reactor. I'll give you that. Is there anything you want to talk about before I go? Do you want to congratulate me for being partner again? And do you want to tell me that you're going to go to my Instagram and you're going to like my reel and maybe even leave a comment? I do imagine the Claude timeline. Thank you, Wallach, for being the patron saint of that video and bringing that video to life. The video would not have lived without you. Thank you, Matthew. Yes, I, at the time, was convinced that I needed big hair to balance out my big face. But I've since learned that just creates more bigness. The big hair doesn't actually distract from the big face. My brilliant moon face was made to catch the light. Thank you, Liddy Bros, for at least saying sorry. It's important. It'll live on. It must live on. And I must bid you all adieu and go to sleep. That's all right, Sim. We all forget sometimes, okay? But I'll see you soon, maybe even tomorrow if you're good. And don't do any crime in the meantime. Unless you have to. That's okay, Matthew. I don't know why you all hate Instagram so much. It's because you're all boys. That's what, you're all men, which is why you have to apologize. Post it as a YouTube short. It's not a YouTube short, though. It's me complaining about having a stream and then saying what I'm going to stream. I'll see you tomorrow. I hope I fixed the fucking YouTube issue, but who knows. All right. Adieu. Don't be like Ehud Barak. Get the important task done. Don't distract yourself with second tasks. That's what I feel we learnt tonight. Sleep tight.